We'll go ahead and get started tonight. 7, 8, 9, 10. We do have a quorum. Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order of the July 20th Historic West Des Moines Master Plan Steering Committee meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
To approve.
So moved by Steve, a second. Second by Steph Tranel. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes and the agenda is approved. Next, we have approval of the June 29th, 2022 minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes that were distributed? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
Sure.
So moved by Mark. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Cleo. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining.
Oh, perfect. And Scott will abstain. Yes, because you had to leave early. didn't you?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. And the motion passes and the minutes are approved as distributed. Next, we'll read the opening statement for all in attendance. Welcome all to the historic West Des Moines Master Plan Steering Committee meeting. This committee is made up of independent volunteer citizens. The makeup of the committee was determined by the mayor and city council. The committee is not part of city administration. The steering committee is served in our efforts by the city of West Des Moines staff. The committee's purpose is to 1, partner with the city of West Des Moines to build interest, excitement, awareness, and community consensus around a comprehensive strategy for historic West Des Moines by representing the diverse interests of current businesses, residents, and investors. 2, work towards updating the master plan to address growth and redevelopment going forward into the future. 3, make recommendations and provide guidance to the city council on matters pertaining to the creation, revising, and implementation of historic West Des Moines master plan. It is our goal that the meeting is orderly. We encourage discussion, but recognize the fact that there will be differences of opinion. We request that everyone is shown mutual reverence and discussions are conducted in a respectful manner. To ensure the meeting does not become unnecessarily lengthy, we ask that everyone's testimony be focused on new facts or evidence not already presented. If you wish to speak, please come forward, wait to be recognized by the chair, and then state your name and address for the record. Rules for public comment. When speaking, members of the public should state their name and address prior to making their comments. Each member of the public will be given 5 minutes to speak. All statements at the meeting shall be directed to the committee, and cross-conversation among those in attendance is prohibited. Questions shall be directed first to the chair, who may then ask the proper person to answer, with such answer also being directed to the committee. When the opportunity for public comment is closed, the public may only address the committee if a question is directed to them. In closing, this committee does not make final decisions. All recommendations made will be forwarded to the Plan and Zoning Commission and City Council final action. All right, next we will have open up citizens forum. This would be the time and place for anyone to address the committee regarding any items that are not listed on the agenda this evening. Is there anyone that would like to partake in citizens forum? And just a reminder too, if everyone can kind of increase their volume level so everyone can hear, that would be appreciated.
Hopefully there are some spots.
All right, MJ, go ahead.
All right, so kind of got the impression from last time that this might be the last meeting. So I thought we had way more time, so you guys are going to get a whole bunch of stuff all crammed together.
And MJ, for the record, can you state your address, please?
MJ, 2nd Street. Yes, sweet. All right, next slide. So yeah, we put a little bit of internal development, which is tough because there aren't exactly a lot of open lots here in Junction. Next slide, other than the somewhat contentious lot by Phoenix Elementary. Great spot for a community garden, or as like Vicky has suggested, next slide, housing. But I actually think we can find lots of opportunities for additional housing by being a little bit more creative about what exactly we look for. Next slide. For instance, those pedestrian walkways on 5th Street, excellent spot for a building. Downside, of course, is that cuts off access to the parking lots. You don't really want to do that. But what if you could have both residences and access to the parking lot? What might that look like? Next slide. You could put a building on stilts. And then that has the advantage that now all your diners and pedestrians don't have to worry about rain. You can just rain and not get wet, which is always nice. Next slide. We also have very short blocks here in the Junction, which is lovely. I love short blocks as a pedestrian because it means I don't have to walk very far before I turn. But on the other hand, if you're driving, you don't really care about short blocks. We can combine those facts. Next slide. And you can widen the sidewalk in one direction and use the space that was for cars for additional housing. And if you're like, okay, but that puts a sidewalk in the middle of a block, which is weird. Next slide. We already have those in the Junction north of Vine. So not really breaking any ground there. Point being, if we look, excuse me, if we're creative about where we look for opportunities to squeeze in additional housing, we can totally get in a lot more than you might think. Next slide. Of course, it wouldn't be me if I wasn't talking about pedestrian and bicyclist safety. So let's talk about that. Next slide. Some construction happens, right? And sometimes when you're constructing things, you got to close the sidewalk, and that's fine. But like when the city rebuilt Grand, they literally built a temporary road for cars to get to buildings. Pedestrians should be afforded that same level of consideration. Next slide. So we should make sure that we build temporary pedestrian pathways for pedestrians to get around, right? Like it doesn't have to be expensive. It could be asphalt ramp or a wood ramp and some cones, but it should exist. A pedestrian should not have to fight their way through a bunch of parked cars to get dumped in the street and then potentially run over just to go past a building. Someone in a wheelchair should not have to hop a curb to continue on their way. So, we should build that. Next slide. So we've heard about bump outs from Tesco. I love bump outs. We should totally do bump outs. Bump outs are expensive. On the other hand, what if we could get many of the advantages on a budget? We totally can. Next slide. Traffic cones are really cheap. You can just put down some traffic cones and get sort of a makeshift bump out and get many of the advantages. And you can try that out for a while and be like, hey, we like this. Let's make it a little prettier. Next slide. So yeah, upgrade to some potted plants. Still not breaking the budget. That probably cost you less than heating cost the city, but you can do it. And then come winter, you pack them up, you put them in storage, and then the plows don't have to worry about them. Next slide. We have parking all on one side of the street, which is fine, but it means all your travel lanes are nice and straight. But if you alternate which side of the street parking is allowed on, those parked cars form chicanes, forcing drivers to pay a little more attention, drive a little slower, making the street safer for pedestrians. Next slide. Vine is very wide and very straight, like all of our streets. Mine is 25 feet wide, which makes its lanes 12.5 feet, which makes them highway width lanes. So of course people drive fast down Vine. How do you slow down traffic on Vine? You make the lanes narrower. How do you do that? Next slide. A barrel will work, and they're not expensive. If the city doesn't have any, they could go steal some from the state DOT on First Street and use those. But either way, right? You put them a little bit before each intersection. That causes drivers to have to slow down to make their way through the intersection. Drivers going slower through an intersection are less likely to have a collision. And if they do get into a collision, it is less deadly. So lots of advantages there. And then if you try that out for a while and say, hey, this is actually working, it has reduced our collision rate, maybe you upgrade to something prettier. Next slide. For instance, a planter like the ones on Fifth Street, or maybe you get artsy with it and make it look like a little trolley car or something. But point is, it doesn't have to break the bank. You can have it, and then in the winter, you pick it up, you go put it in storage, and plows don't have to make their way around it. Next slide. My point here being, and thank you all very much for sticking with me. My point here is we don't have to wait for a big, expensive road reconstruction to get traffic calming and pedestrian safety. We can have that now on basically a shoestring budget. So we should. Thank you.
Wow, MJ, thank you so much. And thank you throughout this entire process. You came up with some ways to really creatively think, some solutions to some problems. And I think you really get everyone kind of thinking about what can be done. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yes, Debbie.
There, thank you. I just wanted to say, I have seen some of your comments and presentations from previous city council meetings and master plan meetings, and I am sincerely overwhelmed and inspired by your interest in bringing information, creative thought, fresh ideas, and just wonderful visuals and presentations so that you can help us think about things in new creative ways. And I just want to tell you how much I personally appreciate that. And please keep on going, because you're a valuable contributor. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, MJ. Anyone else for Citizens Forum? Okay, so now we will go ahead and close Citizens Forum. Next, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the discussion of the maximum building height reduction for the Railroad Avenue Area 2, known as RA2. And Mitchell brought this up. So if we want to go ahead and open that discussion of revisiting the height requirements for that area. Mitchell, did you want to go ahead and discuss why you wanted to revisit this?
Sure. Yep. I can kind of give a lowdown where this is coming from. So this is basically, I believe we have a little bit of new information after passing the mixed industrial guidelines from, at the last meeting. We pretty much put those at 30 feet, which is effectively 2 stories. And then I've had additional conversations with like Vicky and the neighbors in that neighborhood. And I think there's enough here, based off of working with Vicky and then also like the new information from the mixed industrial. I think there's enough information that's changed here that it's worth having a revisit or reconsider the building heights of Railroad 2. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, so let's open up discussion to the committee first. And then since it is an agenda item, we will open it up to public comment as well too after the committee has had their discussion time. Any discussion then from committee?
So having missed the last meeting, could you go into a little more detail about new information and this might be a city question as far as what's currently allowed and how that would change with this new proposal?
Yeah, well, so I believe, because mixed industrial is limited to 30 feet now, it does create a bit of an odd, when you look at like kind of where the districts butt up to each other, I guess and I sympathize with Vicky's kind of critique of this. It's odd now, I guess, kind of in retrospect, that Railroad 2 is now 3 stories, given that it's in fairly similar district. So yeah, if mixed industrial is 2 stories, why shouldn't Railroad 2 be 2 stories? We're talking about kind of the similar look and feel, similar uses as it is. Vicky, do you want to?
I mean, you said much of it, but we did discuss at last meeting. We not only talked about the mixed industrial being 30 feet height, but then we went back and we looked at Railroad from 1st to 5th Street, and that's only 2 buildings, 2 stories, or how many feet it is, I can't recall. But to be consistent, then why wouldn't it be the same for 7th or is it 6th to 9th Street? And all of the residents spoke up. They spoke about, what kind of effect it has on their neighborhood, being neighbors. And Helen graciously showed us pictures of, you're going to have a buffer, but take a look at actually what the buffers are looking like now. And in other words, it's much lack of code enforcement. So, but for the residents to have spoken up, we are the ones that live with it every day, all night. We see the effects of it like nobody else, I'm going to say, that is sitting here, because night and day we're seeing it. And all the residents, I believe, when that vote came forth, all the residents were for 2 stories. And so we're saying, listen to the residents, listen to those who live here that has to put up with this, that are going to be neighbors with this, and hear their voices. And the residents heard their voices here on the board, and we voted in support of it. I'm saying, as you're looking at the regulations and the districts as we go forward, that's the only district that has 3 stories. And so I want it to be revisited. I think that it's in the best interest of residents. And that, after all, we're the ones that have to live with it. And I think the voice should be heard. And I think we as a board should empathize and understand. But we have to live with that. Because I still live here too.
And then, so I don't have my my giant book. So what exactly are the boundaries of this?
Yeah, can you pull up those slides we created?
Think.
One second.
I
While
mean,
you're doing that, I just want to say, I've given thought and of course lived in this neighborhood all of my life. And as I go up and down that section, at the most, the one stories look like, okay, that would be the favored. But there are some, I think it's the Baptist Mission and maybe some others, former Baptist, that are more than one story. But it appears to me, and I've said this before, when you're looking at a historic district, that one story and two story fits more with what's history. Instead of coming off of the historic downtown district, then all of a sudden we're up here. We're still part of Valley Junction. And it goes all the way to Grant, and it should reflect the historical as much as we can.
well, the map's up there. The red box shows the area was proposed as RA2, which would be essentially from 7th to 9th along Railroad.
So from the west side of 7th to the east side of 9th?
And I think RA1, correct me if I'm wrong, is 2 stories, correct?
Correct.
From 1st to 5th.
Yep.
The industrial, mixed industrial is 2 story or 30 feet at the most. So,
Yeah, on the north side, on the south side,
I think it's,
it's no higher.
yeah, I think it was 40, maybe 60. I can't remember.
well, the south side is south of Railroad.
South of Railroad.
We have a lot of different heights on south of Railroad.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add to the conversation is from doing development work in other communities and seeing development patterns, there's some differences between industrial-like areas and commercial areas in terms of the type of construction and those kind of things. And typically, I would suspect if we keep it at 2, it's probably keeping it at 1, which may be what everybody wants. That's fine if that's what you want. But I don't think we're going to see many 2-story buildings built out there just because of the economy with it, with having to put in elevators and all those kind of things. If you're going to have to do all that expense, you're probably going to need the extra floor to make it work from an economic perspective. But, if the goal is really for 1, as you said, Vicki, then maybe you do that, but just understand that those trade-offs.
Correct me if I'm wrong, RA1 would be the same, wouldn't it?
It is. I originally proposed 3 there too, and we scaled that back for neighborhood concerns. So it's the same issue. I get it.
You had your hand up?
Is that, what's the zoning code in that area?
Currently?
Right now.
Valley Junction Commercial.
You guys,
I think it's Valley Junction Commercial.
Okay.
Julie has her hand up.
Okay. Julie? Oh, sorry, Scott, were you finished with your
Yeah.
thoughts? Okay. Julie?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in real quick. I think I voted no for the 3-story, and I was listening to the residents. I think the concern is, I look at this picture there in the corner, and that front building looks tasteful. Even that one behind it looks tasteful, and that one looks 3. I think the concern was maybe if 3 stories built in mass somewhere along there, taking up 2 blocks would just dwarf the neighborhood and even possibly dwarf the entrance to Valley Junction, where the buildings are 2-story but slender and that type of thing. So I understand both sides. I don't know what the exact solution is unless we almost go forward and maybe try to even inform what type of buildings these are and what the uses are. But I do worry that 3 stories built in mass would begin to kind of dwarf everything around it. And
So Julie, if maybe they were restricted to, kind of the similar lot size that is currently on 5th Street, do you think 3 stories would be acceptable if there were smaller lots and not necessarily like some of the designs that were coming forward was like kind of like 2 or 3, even 3 lots together?
Right. Yeah. And I remember we thought the renewal by Anderson building was very appropriate. That was a tall 2-story. Their newer building looked kind of like a 2.5. And I think we all agreed those were very much in scale. They were 1 lot size. Yeah, so I think using those 2 buildings to help put some context on, what a building like that, just maybe 3 stories would look like, 1 lot, 3 stories. I can understand the economics of no one's going to build a 2-story building if you have to put in an elevator and it's just not going to work out. So then we don't want to limit ourselves by some, cool affordable housing going in there, which is what we all want. I just worry about the scale affecting the neighborhood and then the entrance to Fifth.
Absolutely. And I think that brings up, oh, yes, go ahead, Clyde.
I just had a question, so to kind of understand the issue. Is it concern about a 3-story building mass being really close to existing residents? Or is it a matter of the building was set back further from that property line where there's residents? Is it more acceptable then, or you just think the building mass is too big, period, even regardless of what the setback would maybe be between the building and the residents?
Clyde, if that was directed back to me, I think
I'm just throwing it out.
the setback, renewals right there on Railroad. I think that's appropriate. I would divert to Vicky on how close the buildings could be, but I think maybe the concern would be, again, if we take up 3 lots and then all of a sudden there's 3 blocks of huge en masse. I think that's probably where my concern is, not the setbacks or proximity. Okay. I won't weigh in on that, not being a neighbor.
So just a couple points I'd like to make out. Vicky brought up the old Baptist mission, and if you go and look at that building, it starts as a 2-story and it stair steps down to one story. So it does have a kind of nice transition into the neighborhood. And then secondly, on the Anderson building, you guys are talking about height, but that backs up to a parking lot, doesn't back up to residential. And I think that's the concern of the residents, is it is backing up to housing. So
Well, that's why I was trying to.
yeah, so
Because the building would be so close to the residents.
Yep. So
setbacks help that or not?
So in that instance, Anderson, that would be the biggest difference for me, is it backs up. One, it's right on the back of Fifth Street and it backs up to a parking lot. Yeah, I'd have a different opinion of that if there's houses right behind it.
Could you do something kind of like we did in the mixed industrial where, if with the side setbacks, it could only be so tall with side setback, whereas if you went up to 30 feet, then you had a 20-foot setbacks. Can't remember if that was in the guidelines now, but if it backs up to a residential, you have to have a further setback in order to go that high.
I think we should stay consistent for whatever reason. And it seems like the same concerns came up for the RA1 district, where we went from 3 to 2. I think we should have that same reasoning here. I just don't see that much of a difference to decipher the 2 or distinguish them.
Yeah.
And as Nate said, yes, Anderson Renewal, it abuts to, more of the commercial district. There's no residential abutting it, not hardly even across it from it. So
Mike,
I just want it to be consistent.
Mike, isn't some of that already addressed? We have some setbacks.
Yeah.
Parking, we have buffering, so.
Give me a couple seconds to do this real quick, but if we can run through these slides and put together real quick, because it shows the sketches that I'm trying to communicate. Julie, I absolutely agree with your point on not having a huge mass building. That's actually when we did the sketch, why we broke these up into little pieces, so we could reduce that mass a little bit. And I think by putting the parking in back, like that we had in that sketch, right, that provides some additional buffer space too. In fact, that would be fine if you wanted to keep 3 stories of almost requiring the parking to be in back, because it does give you some additional separation. And let's just go through these real quick. So we've got some pictures of what is there now, and then what it would look like if you built it according to these sketches, really just to kind of give you some comparisons. So I would like to see some redevelopment of some of these properties along Railroad Avenue, right? To me, some of the existing ones are not particularly attractive and inviting, and of the same character as the rest of the area we're trying to create. So I do want to create something that would encourage people to do development. So that's what we were trying to think with these sketches. So you can just kind of scroll through them real quick, Brad. There's nothing magic about me talking about it to explain. The idea of this one was a step back. It was 2 and 3 stories on that particular photo, as Julie was mentioning. So that was the idea there. This one is built at 2-story, but that's a little older. And then the buffering that we had between the units. So I think, and then this was just a eye level shot with the buffering required, with the separation distance. That's kind of what it would look like at eye level, if it was developed as we've talked about here. So anyway, we were trying to address those height and scale things with the guidelines and the separation, the core. That was the intent. I completely, again, I get Vicky's point, maybe we should be consistent.
Though,
Yeah.
the point is, it's one thing, a building standing out there all by itself. And it's another thing if you've taken into account those considerations to place it in there so it scales properly. Right? You've scaled this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So when you get in there, it's not gonna look the same as a big building sticking up out of nowhere. Kind of an albatross, I guess you'd use the term.
Yeah, that's why we have these guidelines. So you can't do that, right? You've got
That
to
would be an
integrate some things. Yeah.
Have
And
the
the other
dwarf.
component here, I mean, the reality of it is there's an economic viability to improving the area if you can provide developers with something that would make money or break even, as opposed to a losing situation which no one would ever engage in. And that's where you're talking the need to have additional square footage. And this also takes into account the additional parking we wanted too. Right?
Absolutely.
So we're gonna get a lot of parking out of this that we're gonna really seriously be needing here in the near future. And they will sustain themselves from now on. These buildings, if we were to put them in, they'll provide us with the parking that's necessary to service that building, right?
Absolutely.
So,
And I believe it was my understanding as the difference between RA1 and RA2 is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with RA2, there were less houses that actually butted up to the commercial area as opposed to RA1.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the west end of RA2, it's pretty similar, honestly. If you look at the east end, there are some more commercial properties that it butts to.
And there's one school of thought that kind of comes into it is that, when it's a matter of if you want the building to spread out wider and be closer and shorter, or be further away and taller. When it's further away and taller, there's one example here that we show that, you have 85 feet once you get the parking and everything else is there. You can keep it shorter and they can then maximize or try to maximize, it's just spreading it out shorter. And that could bring it closer to a home than before. So it's kind of, I don't know if one's better than the other. I think we're coming to a conclusion on that, but a 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. Which one would you prefer almost? Would you prefer the use to be closer to you and shorter, or further away and taller? It's just kind of a thought to put out there too.
I think another point is its location and its proximity to railroad. Railroad, I ride my bike down there, which is like treacherous. But it's noisy, it's dirty, it's loud, it's hot, and this would provide a buffer to Valley Junction.
We're still talking about the residents. My question would be, are you saying that you couldn't go 2-story and yet provide additional space?
Well, I'm not saying that you can't. I mean, you can. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to make sure that the full picture is kind of painted where,
Okay.
yes, I hear the residents, and I fully believe the residents, should get what they want. But at the same time, the residents should also understand that there's a give and take. If you ask for one thing, there's something else that's might going to happen. So if I was developing a piece of property and they said, okay, well, I can't go 3 stories. Okay, well, I'll just go wider and get my same square footage. And that then brings that use closer to you. And that use being closer to you, is that something that you're okay with? And frankly, right now, you have uses closer to you now. So, I mean, it could be just a wash. So that's just kind of a thought with the whole thing. I'm not advocating one or the other. I'm just trying to make sure that is kind of put in.
And when you're saying use closer, let's say, for example, the buildings face south railroad and then north. So where's the closeness coming? From the north?
Well, what I'm saying is,
If
for
it's
example,
spread
Aaron,
out.
if you go to the slide that shows the rear of the water building now. I forgot what that is. Right, so right now, if you're looking at this picture, with setbacks, the building could come closer to that northern part of the top part of the red square. If you're allowed to go higher, we could advocate that all of the uses stay closer to railroad. And again, it's not saying, I'm not advocating for it, because if it's 2 stories, I mean, it's 2 stories. I work for you guys, but I'm just trying to paint the picture. It was like,
It's not too different than what we did in mixed industrial, where we said if the building's taller, it's got to be set back further.
and in this case,
But we was talking about different heights. If you want to come to those heights, we can talk about it and it would seem more reasonable. But you still have buildings that are dwarfing the residential. And we're not seeing it anyplace else. And all of the same concerns that are being brought up, understandably, but it's no different than what it would be in the RA1, as I'm understanding.
no, I understand. I just wanted to point that out.
Well, I think things would look a lot different on Fifth Street with the 2 new buildings going up if they fell within this criteria, because you'd have parking in the back, you'd have space from the residences, whereas right now it's literally just hovering over them, which is inappropriate, I think. And this has been addressed in this particular case. Oh, so I think the idea of the existing new buildings that we have that are running right up to the alleys are dwarfing the residences, and it's inappropriate to have that type of look. And I think you've addressed that, so we're not going to have that situation again, right?
Correct. On railroad.
So if you go back to the setbacks, you got 80 feet on one side, 20 feet on the other. That leaves about 100 foot of property building space. So you could put up about 100 by 100 building roughly, which is probably twice as big as any of these buildings down here, 3 stories up. To Vicky's point, that's a pretty massive building going up.
And I think that's kind of what Julie was getting at too, that if you kind of block them up and just have, smaller lot sizes instead of a big, massive presence like that.
So you do that at the end of the block, if you're the first house in, even though you got a parking lot there, it's the same difference as the alley on Fifth Street.
Mhm.
You're never going to be able to see that way with that big, massive building there.
And Debbie has her hand up.
Debbie?
Thank you. I'm kind of a language person, and in thinking about what Vicky has said and Mitchell, we keep talking about the residents. That doesn't, for me, resonate the way I think that makes more sense. And that is, the residents are not just residents, they're property owners. True, some of them may be tenants, but they are property owners. We don't just have other businesses and other big scale developers that are trying to come into this area, which has been going on for several years. We have people that have invested in property in Valley Junction from decades ago. So I think much of what we've talked about has been, what do the developers want? What do the developers want? How can we attract developers? And I am a change agent. I am a creative person. I'm an Imagineer. I try to look with fresh eyes. I am certainly not against change. I have personally invested significantly in positive change. But we kind of, the way we talk about this, and part of the us against them has come from the idea of the residents. It's not just the residents. It's people who have in so many ways invested in historic Valley Junction over time, with their patronage. It is the merchants. We don't talk very much about merchants and building owners on Fifth Street. And I think Vicky's point reminds us that much of our decision making has been influenced by what the quotes new developers want. But we need to remember what the people want that have been here all along and are also invested in this place. It's going to make a difference. And when we look back at it, some people have already said, we don't get it. So I think we really need to respect that investment that people have made over time as well, not just the potential investment that could turn into something that we don't even anticipate. So Vicky and Mitchell, I really appreciate you bringing this up because time's a clicking. And that's the whole reason we exist, is because of the reaction to buildings that are bigger than they could have been and would have been more appropriate. So that's I think what we also need to think about. Thanks.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie.
So I think I'm one of the people who doesn't get it, because if you look along Railroad now, which is the entrance to Valley Junction, it doesn't look good. There's a lot of rundown, very decrepit, ugly buildings adjacent to where the residents live. But people seem to embrace that instead of the potential to have something amazing and beautiful. And I live in West Des Moines too. I back up to a busy street. I would love to have a buffer between me and that street. It just doesn't make sense to me that you'd rather have a falling down single-story building instead of a potential structure that looks great, provides a buffer from the noise, and is significant, has like a significant distance from the residences, which is not the case now. I think we should be reminded too that we have the step down agreements in this area, as we do everywhere else, where it can't be a bunch of 3-story buildings. If there's a single-story building, it can go to a 2, and if there's a 2, it can go to a 3. So we will not find ourselves in a situation where everything, all of a sudden we wake up and there's these massive 3-story buildings that span entire Railroad Avenue. So I think that's just something that I would encourage people to remember to think about.
2 things. We actually don't have the step down in this
area?
Not in this area. No, that wasn't part of the.
Sorry.
Part of what was approved. And the second thing is, Deb has her hand up again.
Okay. Yes,
I
Debbie?
just want to say that technique is called a zero-sum game. And I personally don't appreciate the suggestion that some people would rather have rundown, crummy buildings than something that's new and amazing. And I think we need to form this verbally in a little bit different way, because that's not at all what I think Vicky is saying, or that I'm saying, or that Mitchell is saying, or that a lot of other people are saying. So let's keep this a little bit more empathetic, please.
Thank you. I caught it the same way. And it, I just looked at it like, so this is what we rather have. That's not what we're saying.
Okay, so maybe there's not that you would rather have that, but I'm just concerned that we will never see development along this area with restrictions as far as the 2-story. So I think that's an important thing to consider, because I don't know that we'll be able to make progress.
And there's only so much you can do with those existing buildings.
Julie has her hand up.
Julie?
Yeah, I'm kind of along the same lines. Like, could we dive into more of this area to find out what is probably realistic? What's likely to go in here? Are there other areas of West Des Moines where this type of need was present and what resulted from it? Maybe it's not these 2-3-story multi-use buildings. Are they maker spaces? Are they trying to think of some good examples, and nothing's coming to my mind, but I feel like I'm with Steph in that I think this is there's a lot of opportunity in this area for improvement. And if we restrict it so much that nothing happens, I think that's a disservice to this whole process and the time that we've committed. But we also don't want to cause a situation where we're causing future angst against development. So can we deep dive a little bit more into what's likely, some different scenarios? I like a lot of those pictures. Is it a 2-story bank? Is it a small one property 3-story building and next to a 2-story building? You know, can we deep dive into some compromise situations where we're limiting the dwarf potential, but providing enough leeway that it's going to be appeal to future development and improvement? I don't want to say development, improvement, better uses.
Yeah, great question, Julie. Clyde?
Julie, try to answer your question. I mean, these tend to be smaller parcels, and typically what we've seen happen throughout the community on smaller parcels, you know, the people that have convenience stores or have drugstores or small strip retail is what you would probably see realistically, because the parcels just aren't that big where you can't get very much economy of scale in terms of the size of the building. Now, you know, anything with a drive-through is not allowed within the RA2, right? Right. So that would be another potential use. You might see somebody looking at a smaller parcel, like a 1 acre or smaller parcel, but we prohibited that use. So the best you could probably hope for would, and again, a lot of it's subject to price. If somebody did a 2-story building, it might be retail on the ground floor, office on the second floor. But you do, anytime you go more than 1 floor, you're looking at an elevator. So you're going to have something that will be able to afford the rents to be able to afford that infrastructure for that second floor.
Clyde, my mind's kind of going to the Fire Creek, so 50th and Mills, where Fire Creek is. That's 2 stories, right?
Yeah, the one building over where the stuff place is and stuff. That's
Yeah. I mean, that feels appropriate. And there's some viability to that. And maybe that's.
You were dealing with a 5-acre parcel there though, too.
Okay.
And you had Walgreens go in on the corner, and they basically paid the freight for the balance of the site because they had deeper pockets to be able to afford to pay what the developer was asking for that corner.
Yeah. And then across the street by the fitness center, there's that 2-story out parcel that's like a fitness or a physical therapy, maybe.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What used to be next to the bank there? Is that where you're referring to?
I don't know. It's got like a lit stairway, but it doesn't matter. But I mean,
I think a
Cosmetic.
medical. Yeah, it's medical office.
Medical office. Okay. So I think this is a productive conversation to talk about, you know, what's going to be realistic in here, and if we restrict it too much, nothing happens, and that's a lost opportunity. And if so maybe talking more through this. I don't know where we go from here, but I liked this conversation about being realistic of, well, we like this, but that is never a chance that something like that would go in here. So we kind of have to compromise a little bit, I think.
And I think too, maybe some other ideas about what could go kind of into these spaces is, maybe you have retail or restaurant on the lower level, you know, offices. And if you were to go up 2-3 stories, then you could have some more, and maybe not just apartments, but maybe some, you know, condos or something like that. There's a huge need for housing in our community and all over the country right now. And people want to live in kind of urban environments. They want that live, work, play. And so I think that's what draws a lot of people to want to live down here, whether it's single family or apartments. I know there's wait lists for the apartments that are down here right now too, and even in Phoenix. And I think again, going back to that economic viability is if we want to kind of fix up this area, we have to think about that. It's been mentioned, the elevators, but also too, city is putting a huge emphasis on preservation. And so in previous projects, people were able to get a 10-year tax credit. Well, they're kind of putting their foot down on that now and saying if it's new construction, you're probably not going to get that 10-year tax credit. And so you have to and so it's going to be that 5-year. And so you kind of have to look at how best they can basically create these projects and still have affordable rents for the tenants that are going to go in there. And so maybe some of your offices, maybe some of your services go in there. People have said that they want to maintain retail and restaurant on Fifth Street. So maybe some of the wealth management offices can go into this area down here too.
Not, if I may, I understand that. I do. I understand that. And I've had too many people, especially the residents in which these 3 stories would abut up to, talk to us. And when we're talking about the new development and housing, they're all saying it's not for us. It's not affordable. Who can afford $1,100 rent, $1,200 rent, $1,000 rent? It wouldn't be for those who live in the neighborhood and who would like to stay in the neighborhood. There are individuals that would like to come back to the neighborhood, but more and more there appear to be, it's cost prohibitive because the rent is, you have a house that was built in 1800s going for $1,400. So particularly I'm speaking about the Valdez property at 8th and Maple. I think the last I inquired, it was at $1,300. So, who is it for? It's okay because we want it open to everyone. But at the same time, when we're sitting here representing the residents, for whatever reason, because we've lived in this neighborhood a very long time, they believe that any improvements in the neighborhood, that they should be able to be afforded that opportunity to do it or to live in it or have access to it. And I don't think with the rent rates that they could. That's not affordable.
At the same time, we've had great backlash to the affordable housing that was built in the area.
Yeah. What do you mean great backlash?
People were very, very upset about, I think the next to St. Kilda's is affordable housing, and that was not met with any positivity at all.
Or Phoenix.
Or, yeah.
Phoenix, and let me say now, we can go into that. I don't know if you really want to go into it. We're talking about the people's definition, and even all of us sitting here, a few of us may confuse affordable housing with low rent housing.
Yeah.
So I do know that during the Phoenix debate, a lot of the conversation, the disagreements, and I don't want this in the neighborhood, was based on what was perceived to be low rent housing.
Right.
And it's affordable. So not every time, but often when affordable housing come up, it excites people.
Nate will get.
And it's more as to an understanding of what affordable housing means. You could be 60, 70,000.
Exactly.
And so.
Nate, we'll get to you, and then we kind of want to wrap up the committee comments so we can get public comment too.
So I like
cut anyone off.
I like healthy debates, and Vicky asked a couple times, and I kind of want to open it up to the people that are for these 3 stories. Why can we have double standards? We're saying we can have 3 stories here, but we can have 2 stories there. But it's a residential issue down there. But if a developer buys that 4 lots, they're going to be right against residential. But down there, it's okay to have 2 stories, and it's okay for a developer to develop there. But we have to have 3 stories down here to develop. Otherwise, it's not cost prohibited. So I'm just curious to the people that are out there that are, let's go 3 stories. Why is that acceptable to have the double standards? I think that's what's hard for the residents to understand. Make a standard, keep it. Don't give 2 different standards. Don't give a sob story. Well, developers got to have this here, but they don't need it there. Just make it standard.
I don't think it's a sob story. It's just basic kind of economics of building.
Trust me, and I understand that.
I would have voted, I think I voted for 3 in the other area as well. One difference I see here is that there are larger existing commercial properties currently in this section of the road that go back further. And so I think the change wouldn't be as drastic. And on this drawing that we see, I mean, there's a substantial, there's an entire lot between the building and the homes behind it. So
I think would it be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's still a 200-foot lot. So it's a 200-foot lot here or a 200-foot lot there. So it's going to be the same difference. So if we got 200 here,
somebody who doesn't like to live next to people, I'd rather have a parking lot than some.
I'm just saying, we have the same standards going east and west here, and I'm just trying to get on the same field.
And I think too, I know, Ralph, you have your hand up too. As far as the differences, like, let's say between the mixed industrial use versus the railroad, I think those are 2 entirely different types of uses.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about railroad right now.
No, I know, but are you saying why are?
Why down here east?
Okay, so just RA1 and RA2.
Yep, why the
Okay.
difference? I just want clarity, why the difference? Just have a standard.
RA1 was proposed for 3.
Yeah.
I think I do at least. I might be wrong.
Go ahead, Ralph.
But it's an accommodation.
For who?
Nick made a very compelling story not to have a 3-story building next to his house. And we accommodated his opinion. And so we made that change to that area to reflect the smaller building, the shorter buildings, because the type of residential area that's over there, which is different from over here,
It's not really,
doesn't really render itself to 3-story buildings. And we had that through our conversations and our process.
Not a good sample because Tina and Helen said the same thing. And Tina's right close right there on 9th Street. 2 houses. So she said the same thing. So there was an accommodation.
So Steve, you have your hand up and Mike has a comment too.
So we talked a little bit about the Anderson building. So with the 2-story, with this proposed change, which has not been moved yet, would those be allowed?
Yeah, Anderson's 2 stories.
It's existing.
Yeah.
And Julie had her hand up too.
Okay, Mike, were you going to make?
Yeah, so 2 things. One, can you go back to the map real quick? An idea. Because my thought was that, it was closer to the commercial in here and that kind of thing. What if we restricted the 3 stories just to this area that would be adjacent to the Valley Junction transitional and kept everything over there at maximum 2 stories?
Where are you proposing that? 6 and?
I think it's 6th Street. No, what's,
Could you speak up? I'm having problems with this.
8th, cut it at 8th.
I thought we pulled all that out of the earth.
Cut it at 8?
I thought we pulled that transitional out of there.
Did we?
That's the old map.
Oh, it's the old map. Never mind. Done with you. All right, I thought it was.
But I like this discussion. And so, what about 7th?
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
6th and 7th?
Yeah, maybe we stop at 7th.
I was going to say 6.
The other thought that I just wanted to throw out, I pick 4 different things when I'm driving back to Chicagoland to go different routes or whatever, right? Last time I did it, or a couple times ago, I went through Pella, Iowa. Great little downtown if you're not been, it's awesome. And between downtown and they got a college to the south end, there's some new townhomes along that stretch, which are really beautiful. Now, those particular ones are not affordable. Doesn't mean you can't build some that would be affordable, but I thought it was a great transitional use between areas that added population adjacent to the downtown area, still looked beautiful and appealing, and were adding more residents, both from a shopping perspective and providing more housing opportunities. So that's a thought too that I really hadn't given a lot of thought previously to this area. But those would, I think you have those easily 2 stories because that's typically what those things are constructed at anyway. So that's just another idea to throw out since we are throwing out different ideas.
Do you think this area, 2-story, would be attractive for a boutique hotel?
No,
I don't think so.
No?
No.
you
Be more so.
wouldn't be able to get enough units in it to be able to afford the project.
Yeah, the area south of Railroad, we might get one, but north, no, that would.
I think they need a minimum of 90 to 100 rooms in order to, or it's either 80.
Well, there are smaller ones, like I think somebody mentioned the project in Dubuque or something, or Cedar Falls that had like 20 units in it. but and that building was 3 stories too. Right. So.
Julie, did you have your hand up?
She kind of,
Julie, you're on mute.
she kind of said
Sorry,
no.
my comment was already addressed by someone else.
Okay, thank you. So is there a comment to kind of maybe allow some in the railroad of 3-story and then the more western part of it where there's more residential, a maximum height of 2 stories? Is that what you were saying?
6th Street.
Not to interrupt, did we extend, where did we cut off the mixed use, just for clarification? Because didn't we bring it over to 6th Street? So isn't Anderson technically in that now, or no?
Yeah, from what I recall, included like where the Corvette place is.
So that's all mixed use. So then that cuts that out.
Oh, it is.
It's already mixed use. So in theory, that could be a 3-story.
And this probably truthfully brings up a bigger issue and why I asked the question about setbacks. Because even if we have a 2-story building, I think that's something that we need to consider in terms of what the setback should be from the residents. Because you'll still get people complaining, well, those people are right on my, and they're looking into my backyard all the time and I've lost all my privacy. So whether it's 1, 2, or 3-story buildings, we need to think about, do we adjust setbacks with, if it's going from 1 story to 2-story, that type of thing.
And would we?
Well, I guess that's what I'm suggesting that we would take a look at doing.
And since we're approaching an hour on this conversation and we do have other agenda items, we open up for public comment and then we can come back to the committee at this time. All right, so now would be the time and place for public comment on this agenda item. If you have something to say, please come up to the podium and give your name and address.
And this is on the RA2.
This would be on RA2. So this would be the height requirement RA2, the comments would be on. Are your comments regarding this?
Sorry, I've got other comments on other things that'll come later, right?
Yep, yeah, so just
So I won't
if
bring
you
in the
can.
other objects yet,
Perfect.
but I don't mind doing it.
We'll keep it germane to this conversation topic at the time.
Okay. What I was listening to, and this is where I've been with this situation. I felt like everything was being rubber stamped. That's it, that's it, that's it. And I was also looking at the fact is that, which they brought up, was that seniors, we weren't represented with what you were talking on home ownership, but that was brought up tonight finally, that we have put a lot of blood, sweat, years, family history and stuff like that. That was the first time that that's ever been brought up. Like I said, I just didn't think anybody really gave any dang for all the seniors that came in and spoke because I didn't feel you guys were listening. And I still feel that way. It'd take a while for me to change if I do. But anyway, when you were talking about, and the one thing that I was bringing up that I thought about is that when you were talking about rundown, falling down buildings, I went along railroad in my mind. And I understand where you're coming from. Don't get me wrong. But those buildings have roofs on them and they have sides on them, which is more than a lot of them. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to you, but they have had problems. One of the things that I was looking at, and I brought this up before, is that when you have a rental property, by God, you better have the electric and the wiring and the painting and the windows and all this done on a rental property. What are the zoning codes for businesses? Shouldn't they have some standards? Also, I also brought up at another time, which is brought up tonight too, was the fencing. So why isn't, this is going with what the buildings is. Why isn't it you're going with what the codes are to enforce, to have these buildings look better? Because some of them have been there a long time and they need painting more than they do structurally. I mean, I can't think of anyone that's fallen down. I'll be honest with you. Can you? I mean, I don't know. Well, they look rough. but they're not falling down. They need,
There's a couple
They
that
need-
aren't far from falling down.
well, but they need maintenance.
Lack of code.
I mean, the thing of it is, are you going to, somebody that's been there for 50, 100 years, are you going to come in there and say, look, you're falling down here? Couldn't you go in there and say, hey, look, you need to work on this and this because it's the safety and code enforcement?
And you've mentioned this and as quite a few other people, and when we've talked to Tesca about that, that's probably one of the things that we're going to suggest to the council, that they take a look at some type of property maintenance requirements or ordinance to address a lot of the issues you're referring to. Unfortunately, a lot of those properties were built so long ago before the city had any codes. And other than a life safety issue, there's not a lot that we can do in terms of telling them you got to paint your building, things like that.
I had a code come up on me,
But that's on a residential property, rental property, and that's different because we do have codes affecting residential rental property.
well, I mean, I understand that, but why is it these people that are renting these businesses, running themselves, how come they can't have some type of code where they have to maintain their fence?
That's what we're talking about.
On that part.
And Helen, just to be specific, the agenda item that we're discussing right now is the height requirement for RA2. So we want to keep your conversation germane to the height requirement of those buildings in that area at this time.
Okay, we're sticking with under 30, way under. When I was looking at some paperwork, and I can go on that, in the medium density area, which you're talking the whole strip along there, the highest building in the industrial area right now is what, 23, 24? 24 feet.
Yeah.
And they're wanting to go in my district. I don't know if it's affecting, because you're talking, elevators and stuff. The 24 foot was probably the highest, and they want to go up 6 more foot in the industrial area. And it's like, really, so, but yeah, there is a discussion, and when I looked at the big buildings out there that were 24 and then looking at 60 along Railroad Avenue, no, I'm totally against it. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Lynn.
We gotta do something with code, and I'll get with you.
I'm Tina Shine Blue. I live at 107 10th Street. I also own 103 10th Street. It's a rental house. I've had a nephew that's lived there for almost 15 years. So it's actually in my will to give it to him. So he's not planning on moving. I have a 1-story business behind me. We've gotten along fine. I've had problems with their lights blaring into where, like I said, in my hot tub, and it's blaring right into in my backyard. He fixed it. That's 1 story. 2 stories, it's going to be even more so. 3 stories, 2 stories, you can probably have trees that will block that area and kind of do a buffer. At 3 stories, they're going to have to put security lights on top of the building. It's going to just blind me inside my house.
If I could, the city has requirements now on these projects that the light basically has to be confined to the property, that it can't create a situation like you're talking about now.
Okay. Also, 3 stories, there's no buffer, there's not trees that are going to be being able to be, people will be able to look right into my backyard.
That's where I was talking about the setback issues.
Yeah. No. And I had a friend that lived in a new apartment building, the south side. And she said that she had problems because the apartment building was so close to the street that when she would turn around to lock her door, her toddler was already down the street, down the steps, and already past the sidewalk and into the street. So I think that, you've got to think about how close are you putting these apartments right to railroad. No, I think that that's going to be something to think about.
Thank you, Tina. Anyone else for public comment?
Under the Second Street. So when I wandered around Valley Junction, one of the buildings that I think of maybe might be similar in size would be Phoenix Elementary, right? Because that's a pretty big building. But when I wander along, even though it's very close to the street, it doesn't feel intimidating or imposing. And a big part of that is the landscaping, right? There's those nice big trees that hide the building. And Teska's already addressed some of that. Well, not even green space, but like trees themselves, right? Because those are things that they hide the building and make it feel much less imposing in a way that parking lot or even just grass wouldn't. And unfortunately, trees take a long time to grow, so, but also I share an alleyway with people on First Street, so during a lot of this discussion, I've been thinking, okay, well, what would I be okay with? If we were talking about this on First Street, and for me, 2 stories is obviously, sure, who gives a shit? But, well, right, but like even 3 appropriately masked, I feel like I might be okay with. And like when I say appropriately masked, right, I mean like maybe the first third of that lot on First Street and the second third of that lot down to 2 stories, and the last third parking and a row of trees to provide some separation. Obviously, like some residents would disagree, and I'm not sure I'd be okay with 3, but like it's just 3 stories isn't that tall, not really, particularly if it's masked, particularly if you've got some landscape buffering like trees. So it's not that big of a deal. For me, the more important thing would be just making sure that the buildings aren't super big, that they are broken up, that they are masked appropriately.
Thank you, MJ.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Seeing none, this will be the time and place to go ahead and close public comment on this agenda item, and we'll come back to the committee. Any more discussion, or do we want to go ahead and make a motion on this agenda item? Doesn't sound like there's any more discussion. Mitchell, since it was your item, do you want to go ahead and make a motion?
Well, actually, I guess I would like to maybe means test this before I make the motion. I did like the idea of the so here's what it's not a motion. I want to say it before I make it a motion.
And I saw Julie's hand up too, so maybe she can get a comment in before a motion is made too. But go ahead, Mitchell.
Okay, so here's the pre-motion. Up to 3 stories between 6th and 8th Street with the step-up requirement. Everything west of 8th Street is 2 stories. I'm just throwing that's an idea. How does anybody feel about that?
I guess I need clarification, Mitchell. What do you mean by step up? You mean
There's no step up.
in those couple blocks, they could do 3-story with appropriate setbacks from the residential, or what are you saying?
I guess I'm referring to the 1-story, 2-story. Like you have to look at your the next building next to the next structure, and you can only go 1 story up at a time. Or that not really work?
Most of the buildings at least the residential buildings are all 1.5 stories, which count as 1 story. So the most anybody probably could do 4 stories.
Right, but isn't the whole idea behind this, and why we are doing this on 5th Street, is to sort of provide
That's what he's saying.
a break?
Didn't he?
7th.
Just to clarify, so we'll get into it when we look at the parking map, right? But I went through to see where you could actually do a 3-story on 5th. With our step up regulations, there's 1 lot. You possibly could do it now. So we're saying 2 stories if we do that step up thing.
Yeah. Does that give you some clarification there, Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, that's my intention. I'm gonna leave it there. I'd like to know how Vicky and others feel about it though.
I'm still for 2 stories. And if, which I hate to say this, but if we were to think in the alternative, it's difficult. It's difficult. I'd say 3 stories to 7th Street.
Could you speak up, please, Vicki?
3 stories to 7th Street. I'm not for that. I'm for 2 stories.
Julie, you had,
that basically 1 block?
Basically, that's the
Yes.
Pelican building.
yeah.
That's it? Half a block?
Yeah.
It'll be, yeah, because the commercial district goes to the alleyway,
Yeah.
and then you have the Culligan building, and that'll be 7th Street. Now, there is a vacant lot between the Culligan building and the next house.
If I may, what we've been discussing, the residents' concern is that height and decisions for the height of the buildings be consistent with everything else in the different various districts. So for example, let's talk about Railroad, RA1, 1st Street to 5th Street. The proposal was for 3 stories, but the vote said 2.
1st to 4th, yeah.
1st to 4th. Okay, not 5th. Yeah, what's there? 1st to 4th. But then from 5th, would it be 5th down to 9th Street, same proposal.
Alley between 6th. It's the
Am I
alley
correct?
between 6th. It's the alley between 6th and 7th is where, because where the
Because it's commercial.
county center and the Corvette place is, that's all in the
Commercial.
historic business district area.
Okay. So being consistent is the point here. From the alley of 7th and 6th Street down to 9th Street, proposal was the same, 3 stories as it was for RA1. But the vote came, and when the vote came, all the residents, I believe all, voted for 2 stories. And the residents in the audience spoke as to the reason why. But it ended up being 3 stories. So we're back today to reconsider that vote for it to be at 2 stories and not 3 story. We looked last week at the mixed industrial, and I think the highest, depending on the setbacks, is 30 feet. When you're looking at the north side of the street.
Correct.
So you're 30 feet here, 36 possibly on RA1. When you get that stretch from 7th Street Alley, 6th Street to 9th Street, we're going 3 stories. The residents don't want that. 36. So that's what's before us. I think there's been healthy conversation. I'm still for the two stories.
Debbie's got her hand up.
Yeah, so is Julie here. Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the part about being consistent, I'm a little I don't know if I agree with completely, because I like how we've been very intentional about these specific areas. They're small enough that we really can imagine what they likely could be. And I think we all agreed first, the RA1 just felt like it would remain, there's no commercial except for the corner right now. I think we all imagined, I think we're imagining each section differently and intentionally. And I like that about this process. So I don't necessarily agree that we need to be consistent, because they're just unique pockets of land. What's there currently is different. what it kind of sets itself out to be in the future feels different to me. And then the difference in uses between mixed use and the industrial, to me, demands a different conversation about height. So as far as from hearing from the residents, being consistent probably isn't going to convince me to just wholesale 2-story, because I like how we've been intentional about what each pocket could be in the future. I would need to be convinced maybe differently as to why 3-story shouldn't be considered, or why 2-story is the best for RA2.
Thank you, Julie. Debbie, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I really appreciate what Julie just said because it caused me to think about this in a little bit different way. I do understand pockets. I also understand a cohesive vision. And I was thinking back about the mind map and what we all shared, what we all said. And I keep coming back to what is, who is Historic Valley Junction? What it started out to be, what it can become. And there are, I know a woman who owns a farm out near Idell. There are a lot of people that have huge, massive pieces of land, and they can go out and they can create pretty much what they want to do. They can build a Disneyland if they have enough land. They can build a shopping center. When you start from scratch, you can try to approach your imagination if your pockets are big enough or you can get enough funding from other sources. But we have this crown jewel, this nugget, this history, this beginning. And I keep holding on to that as essential to our brand. But I'm not alone. This is what we all said at the beginning of this. So I try to frame everything that we talk about in reference to what is it going to do to the heart of Historic Valley Junction. We've got this neat little arch at the beginning, and it leads people in, just like an amusement park or a Glen Oaks or any kind of development. So what is it going to do to that wonderful entrance welcome point if we have bigger buildings on the side near that area? Everything for me is balanced by what is it going to do for the Historic Valley Junction that has grown and developed and was already moving brilliantly toward a future before the opportunity zones were passed, before all of those big reduction in capital gains were passed in 2017 that just opened the floodgates. You know, that's what a huge part of the interest in this area is, because of what we had become and because of national decisions to facilitate the development of blighted areas, some of which the money has gone to are not at all blighted areas. And to ignore that part of this is to not know the total picture. So I guess in Julie's point, how does more of a 3-story building on or set of buildings in comparison to the entrance, to the arch, to 5th Street, how is that going to affect that? Is it going to enhance or is it going to take away? And so that would be another thing to think about, where we all started with this entire committee, why we were formed, and what we said in our mind map. That's what I'd recommend thinking about.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah, there's no doubt any new building would enhance an area. And we're calling this blighted. I know what Deb's talking about. Census don't see this area, if I'm correct, as being blighted. We do. But that doesn't, any new buildings would enhance the area. Any new building would enhance the area.
Vicky, I'm talking about a 3-story versus a 2-story. Obviously, a new building would enhance the area. A lot of us have put in a lot of work to try to move toward that goal. So I'm talking about the scale of the 3 stories versus the 2 stories, which is what you originally, were talking about. So just to clarify.
I guess my question would be, because we could go ad nauseum at this. My question would be, are we moving away from preserving his history or that historic look? And are we trying to make the 7th to 9th more of have more of an urban vibe? What, as I heard Julie say, what are our intentions? Because often as I sit at this table, I ask this. I wonder, well, what is the city's intention? What are others? But what are our intentions? And I believe once we know exactly what your intentions are, it shapes your argument. And so if this is to remain part of the stretch of it being historic, I say 2 stories because that's more to me. This is me. Seeming more historical than the big one. When you get into 3 stories and the different types of uses, then I think we're getting into creating a different vibe in the area going away from historic. And so I think that's what shapes our arguments with the residents as well. And we've gone through this all through the process, so it's something we understand. But what is the intention? What is it that the city wants to see there?
Go ahead, Steve, and then I think we should probably wrap up our conversation soon because it is now an hour and a half in on this topic.
Yeah, I would agree. I just say, I think Mitchell and Vicky have come and presented their reasons for wanting to abut to the existing residential neighborhood to the north. I dislike it when we talk about the historic of the historic, because when you look at this between 6 and 8, there's nothing historic there. There's buildings there. There's empty lots.
The neighborhood.
Lots. I mean, adjacent, I'm just talking about the strip adjacent to railroad. I'm not talking Gifford. I'm talking directly adjacent to railroad. When we talk about Fifth Street, it's not going to look like railroad and vice versa. So I guess I feel like this discussion should be more focused on how it relates to the residential area to the north, rather than how it relates to what are already 2-story buildings that lead to them of Fifth Street. I think those are 2 different discussions. I don't see making 6th to 9th or whatever looking historic. That's not going to happen. It's not historic in terms of its architecture. And what we decide here is going to maybe determine if and how it gets developed. But I think that height thing needs to be addressed. And my understanding is Mitchell, since Mitchell voted for the 3-story, he needs to be the one to bring this up as a motion. So I guess I would say we've talked this for an hour and a half, and maybe it's time for that motion.
I just want to say, and I'm through with it. Excuse me. Just want to say that as we've been sitting here, looking at all the districts, we look at what's historical. We chose some of our designs. We went through and looked at pictures and made preferences, yay, nay, based on what we think would look historic.
I would say what we thought would look attractive or appropriate, but not historic.
I think I'm thinking when we spoke about the facade, the architectural value, some of the design.
And those
To me,
approved.
And that's what we were looking at. Have we brought in and when we said no to some, I think my selection was like that looks too modern or too much for the area, doesn't fit into what's historically there or what is deemed to be historic. And the neighborhood is part of it.
And I think through the guidelines for that area, it established the architectural styles and everything. So I think that is an important.
It been any different?
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Mitchell, do you want to go
I
ahead and
understand.
make the motion?
Yep. I motion, yeah, so I guess this will be a simple one. I motion that Railroad 2, or that we vote on Railroad 2 being limited to 2 stories.
Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Vicky. Do you want to do a roll call vote for this? Okay.
Mitchell?
Yes.
Okay. Vicky?
Yes.
Steph?
No.
Second here. We don't have our scribe tonight, so. Okay, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. Puff?
No.
Okay. Nate?
Absolutely.
Meredith?
No.
Okay, second here. Gotta write down the names. Okay. Cleo? Yes. Scott?
Abstain.
Mr. Cutler?
Abstain.
I'm sorry.
Abstain.
Okay.
You need Julie.
Steve.
Julie and Steve, I got it here too.
Okay, and
Debbie, yeah.
Spit it out.
So
Steve no.
Steve, no, okay. Let's see, Debbie?
Yes.
Okay.
Julie.
No.
Julie, no, okay.
and then we need Renee.
Renee.
Renee Johanna.
Yes.
Oh, Renee Yohanmer, I'm sorry, Renee.
Yes.
Okay,
Any other votes? We have 7,
Okay.
5, and 2.
7-5, the motion passes.
Yep, motion passes, and the height require or height maximum for RA2 will be at 2 stories. On next item will be the discussion of the design guidelines for the commercial districts along First Street and Grand Avenue.
Awesome. What the presentation?
Karen's getting it.
There, you got it? Okay. Let's fly through the first batch really quick because it's kind of summarized the process and let everybody in the room has been a part of the process for the whole time. So I don't need to do a whole lot of that thing, but we started back in September. Well, Tesca started back in September. You guys started before that. With working in this area and developing the design guidelines. We've been taking it piece by piece through the process. This is my 11th meeting. Again, you guys have had a few more than that, but we've really been trying to make sure that we have had opportunity for dialogue and discussion throughout the process. So we are here to talk about commercial areas tonight, right? Commercial areas, go ahead, next slide. Really what I'm talking about here is properties that are zoned and planned and developed commercially around the periphery of this area, right? So not Railroad, because we've already created separate guidelines for Railroad, but along First, along Grand, those commercial areas are what these standards would apply to. It does not include the Bellgate area up there at Grand and First. That area has a separate set of guidelines and it's been developed as a plan development. If you go up there and look at it, kind of tell by the style of the signs and the look of the buildings that they already created a separate for that. We're not touching that, but what we would be talking about is like commercial development that might happen along First, along Grand Avenue, and those kind of areas is what we're really talking about here. Slide. Look on the right, if you're showing, you can see them there, but this is just some pictures of stuff that's out there right now. Some of it is older, particularly the stuff along Grand has been there for quite a number of years. You have had some new commercial development like the O'Reilly's auto parts store and that kind of thing on First. And you can see some of the developments out there now. Obviously, the Normandy Plaza where Hy-Vee has been there for a while too, but these standards would apply if that ever got redeveloped per se. And again, this is the same kind of thing, right? We're not imposing these requirements on existing development, but if the site got redeveloped or if they were remodeling or something, that's when these standards and design characteristics. So what kind of uses? Pretty self-explanatory, I think, but these are generally the uses you would see along a road like this, kind of shopping centers, fast food restaurants, retail things, hair salons, personal services, like dry cleaner or something like that. Some office space. Obviously, we've got a grocery and Hy-Vee that's out there. Typically anticipate seeing really kind of retail service kind of focused uses, no residential, and that kind of thing. Next, we'll probably have that already. Drive-throughs, yes, drive-throughs would be allowed in this kind of area. Typically treated as kind of a conditional use. We want to make sure that it's done safely and appropriately and fits the type of use. So, you know, Starbucks, you need 100 car stacking thing, but if it's a dry cleaner, you need 2, right? That kind of thing. We got to work into the standards of design. Gas stations also might be appropriate, and no residential uses, we would think, and it would certainly be meeting all of the building codes and regulations changes to the zoning standards in terms of setback of those kind of things. So I'm just going to work. So our goals again, to be sensitive to the surrounding neighborhood and the context of the area. Certainly want to make sure that we are holding quality design standards and making sure that the area is visually appealing and attractive that fit into the overall historic West Des Moines area. Certainly want to pay close attention to landscaping and those kind of things to make sure that we are transitioning uses and making sure that it kind of fits together completely. And certainly want to make sure that the parking works, right? That it's reasonably buffered, that we have enough parking out there to meet the demands of that particular use. These uses generally would be, most of the customers would probably be driving there as opposed to walking and biking. We'd love to bike and walk, but just realistically, probably most of them would be driving in to the type of development. So we need to be respectful of that. Make sure that that's accommodated, but done so in a way that still creates a site that is appealing and attractive. So with that, Erin's going to talk you through some of the design standards that we've come up for this area.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. I'm back hanging out on 5th Street, as you can see from my background. No, I'm kidding. So in terms of running through the building form and architecture, what you're going to see, is consistency with the guidelines that we've run through to date. Just because these are commercial buildings, they should still be held to a standard similar to what we're looking at in other areas. So from the list here, noting that new additions, renovations, infills need to be sensitive to that neighborhood context, that massing and delineation are very important in terms of how you break up these facades so that they don't look like one large massive building. That a combination of heights and elements to add interest are important. They go a long way. And that surface details like score lines, color changes, those aren't enough. We are really looking for horizontal, vertical articulation that also has scale and depth to it. So these are 2 photos that we'd be supportive of. You can see some of those details in terms of the roof line and just the detailing underneath the cornices and elements like that. Here's another example, corner features we talked about in other districts, but looking at the elements, brackets as highlighted here and awnings, as well as little details. You can see the image on the right, those articulation in the brick and the columns and the windows at top. So these are examples that we'd be looking for in future development. In terms of building form and architecture, again, looking to recommend rhythm, articulation to have those storefront feel, right? So how you break up those buildings that go into shopping centers to give that individual element to it. We all have highlighted the importance of entries and arcades and awnings, especially in the mixed use commercial. So we brought that over as well. Looking to the architectural elements, lighting details are important. We hit on that a bit later as well. And that freestanding buildings that are visible to the public, they really need to have that equal level of material finish on all sides. You know, there can't be that forgotten about facade. So this is an example of a gas station that I actually, I'm a community planner in a nearby town, and this was a gas station that we worked through as part of the development review process that got built. So you can see this is something we'd be recommending, that gas stations can look really good. They can bring in stone materials, natural materials. With guidelines in place, you can encourage them to include bike racks and nice landscaping and lighting features. So what I also want to show, and I recognize that this is a little pixelated, but the image on the left is what was presented to us. And by having guidelines and codes in place, which is what we're doing here tonight, we were able to get that development to what you see on the lower right and ultimately to what was developed here. So just a quick case study of the importance of how these come into play into creating the look, feel, and character of the area and what you want to see. Real life example. So we've carried those through here. So in terms of building materials, again, really encouraging neighborhood context, sensitivity there, advocating that materials be natural, you know, so that stone, brick, masonry combination, discouraging use of CMU blocks, any flat, gray, untextured material. And we have a few examples of those here. You know, these are things that we wouldn't be encouraging in new development, and important to have those in the guidelines to point to. In terms of pedestrian safety, connectivity, this comes into play within the site design. So within the parking lots and sidewalks, we're recommending that there be clear pedestrian walkways, that they're ADA accessible, which is required in code. To the extent that developments that go in can share entry access ways and turn in to reduce curb cuts and enhance walkability. And then internal crosswalks throughout parking lots, right? So if there's a large parking lot, it should be very clear in terms of how those pedestrians and how those visitors are getting from that parking space to the frontage of their destination. Within site design too, we're supporting public art. There's great opportunities, even within commercial developments, to carry that storytelling and history through. I'll show a few examples on the next slide. Integrating street furniture, benches, you know, in larger areas, there's opportunity for mini plazas, like you see on the lower left. Places that are comfortable, shaded, areas where you can take a breather and sit down or wait for your partner as they're shopping in a store that you might not want to go into. Who knows? As Mike hit on, drive-throughs would be allowed, but are permitted as a conditional use. They require extra oversight, and so that would be a part of that process. These are a few examples on the public art front. The image on the left just highlights how you can take a big facade, which we know can happen, and make it something of a storytelling piece. This is actually a two-story building that is right at a parking lot, as well as integrating elements like bike parking, that's art, as you see on the right. And then this is another example of a railroad mural. There's also been a lot of historic murals as you look back through the different images of Valley Junction's past, and might there be something there that could be pulled from and celebrated on a facade. Certainly has been done elsewhere. So lots of great things to pull from, and we want to support that and recommend it, encourage it within these guidelines. Impervious surface is obviously a concern with commercial developments, parking lots. So we've integrated recommendations here to note the reduction in impervious cover on site. Obviously, we want to mitigate any flooding. We want to improve stormwater. So we highlight tools like bioswales and rain gardens, integrating different types of materials and combinations therein. And the photos here are what touch on that. You can also integrate some educational signage in there, obviously spreading the good word on why these are in place, what they're doing, and then also native plantings, pollinators. Those can also be low maintenance, which can be advantageous in different developments, and they can soak in a lot of water. Certain native plantings can. In terms of general landscaping on site, these are similar to the guidelines that we've carried over from other sections, but being very mindful of year-round appeal, salt tolerance. These are parking lots. They're going to be salted by salt trucks. So we want to keep that landscape material looking good throughout the year and after winter. Proper irrigation and drainage is recommended. Certainly the heat wave that we've experienced this summer is a good point in case of why that is important. Foundation plantings to really soften the facades of these buildings, and then both interior and exterior parking lot landscaping is recommended. Here are a few more photos showcasing what parking lot perimeter landscaping would be. So off-street parking areas, we're recommending that those be screened from the public right-of-way with at least a 3-foot kind of landscape element. This can be a shrub. We don't want it something where it would completely block the view, obviously, but can help with headlight intrusion and really just accent that public right-of-way and entry into the parking lot. Off-street parking areas, we're recommending include a 10-foot landscape buffer between the paved parking area and the public right-of-way. And then perimeter landscaping obviously has to be mindful of site triangles and safety. Here's a few examples of both recommended and discouraged. On the left, you can even do kind of raised buffered areas, as you see with that stone wall. On the right, again, we're looking for more than just a sod strip, and that doesn't have any buffering really between the parking lot and the public right-of-way. In the lower right image, there is no landscaping whatsoever. So again, not sufficient for future development. Parking lot interiors. We focus on parking lot landscaping a lot because this does go a long way and it is very important. For the interior of the parking lot, again, introducing elements to not only provide low elements like shrubs, but also provide shade, which is really important in larger areas. Hardscaped areas like patios and wide walkways should include that landscaping to soften the hardscape. Landscaped islands. So these are landscape fingers. They're called different forms, but depending on the number of spaces, different parking lots have various numbers of them. So we're encouraging landscape islands to help divide up those paved areas, to shade those areas with shade trees. And then finally, also including ground cover shrubs within those. And this also goes back to the zoning ordinance. In terms of what we wouldn't want to see, obviously, top right, a large paved area. Bottom right, this is too minimal, not enough trees, and it doesn't include any ground cover within those areas. The trees don't look too happy about it either. And on the left, no foundation plantings. I think it's clear here that this is all hardscape. It's all concrete and asphalt, and that's not the level that we're going to be pushing for with future development. And as Mike noted, screening's also important. So some of these images obviously look familiar with commercial properties adjacent to residential parks, open space, and recreation. We're recommending they be screened with either a solid, so a 100% opaque fence without landscaping, or an open fence with landscaping. That it's recommended that the landscaping be comprised of evergreens. Typically those provide the best buffer, you know, in terms of just being dense. And that fencing and screening, again, needs to take into account the architecture, the building materials. Privacy fencing, 6 feet tall. We're recommending materials be vinyl, wood, masonry, stone, metal, or a combination. And similar to other sections, chain link and temporary fabric fencing wouldn't be permitted. For trash and equipment screening, another important aspect of the commercial guidelines, outdoor dumpsters, roof-mounted mechanicals, ground-mounted mechanicals, all need to be screened so that whether it be fencing, parapets, which are roof specific, landscaping, that they be screened. So you have the examples here on the right that show dumpster enclosure, as well as parapets on the lower right, so that you don't see the rooftop mechanicals. Some examples of what we wouldn't want to see, just obviously out in the open, no screening. And then with regards to lighting, again, we're focusing here on exterior lighting fixtures being cutoff type. We want to eliminate glare, spillover, and also that any lighting used to illuminate off-street parking or loading areas certainly be arranged to divert the light from any residential uses. This would be a very important part of the PUD process that would be confirmed. And that lighting should not exceed 1 foot candle at the property line. And that's a foot candle is a term just meaning it needs to not spill over. It needs to be very low to not affect surrounding neighbors. We also want to encourage lighting that goes beyond just what you see in the parking lot. So the detail there in the center, the Talbots, there, it's got chrome lighting flanking the entryways. And then also there's really nice treatments for bollards and walkway lightings, especially in larger sites where you're directing pedestrians. And an example of, you know, how lighting can really add character. I like this example because too, this is Deer Park Town Center, and in the wintertime, they put lights all along the roof elements, which obviously reminded me of Valley Junction. So there are great ways to really enhance the character of commercial development and such that it's in line with the character and values. And with that, I will turn it over for questions regarding any of the slides and discussion.
Any comments or questions? Yes, Nate.
What, just out of curiosity, what's the height requirement existing through there? I mean, because everything's pretty much 1 story. Is that what it's, I mean, is there even a height requirement through there right now?
There is in the zoning districts that are out there. I don't remember the exact number, Brad. Clyde, do you guys know?
Did I miss it? Didn't hear it? Are they?
I mean, I think it would allow a couple story. I'm talking off the cuff, so if you got the right number, just throw it out here, right? But I think it would probably allow a couple stories, but reality is when you look at the sites and you work in the parking and whatever, you're probably going to end up with 1 story.
A lot of the commercial areas, this is kind of the first, when you look at the strata of our city, this is kind of the area that was the first kind of looking at the city. So you're going to get more of those shorter buildings, massive parking lots. But I do think it's either 2 or 3 stories in some of these areas that.
How big, just out of curiosity, do the lot sizes vary through there or?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got really small lot, you know, half-acre lot up to Normandy Plaza.
pretty big size.
Yeah, it was like about 50 acres, so you're kind of all over the place.
I was just curious why there wasn't any literature in there, and that kind of helps explain it a little bit.
Any other comments, questions? Yes, Steve.
I like it. I move we approve it.
Well, before we move, let's let's get public.
That was fine.
Okay.
Good try, Steve.
Any public comment on this agenda item? Awesome. Okay. All right. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment on this agenda. And seeing as though there's a lot of enthusiasm for this, Steve, did you want to go ahead and
I like it. I move we approve it as presented.
as presented? Is there a second?
Debbie seconds it.
Debbie seconds it and Vicky seconds it too. Multiple
We
seconds.
got 2 seconds.
All right. Any other discussion on these guidelines? Well, I think that means that you did a great job. So I think we'll go ahead and vote. All in, want to do roll call vote?
Oh, just,
I can do it.
I think it's.
just do all in favor of it. Okay.
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 All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining.
Scott will be abstaining. Okay, Julie, I saw your hand up. Was that an aye?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. And Renee and Mitchell, if you can just vocalize yours real quick since we can't see hands.
Aye.
Aye.
This is Renee.
And Mitchell, aye.
You said aye. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So that motion, that passes and the motion carries on the design guidelines for that commercial area. Thank you so much for that presentation. I think those guidelines look fantastic and it'd be a nice improvement to those areas.
Wave a wand and make it happen.
All right, moving on to the next agenda item is a parking update. So Mike, we'll go ahead and go to you for the parking update.
Back to the PowerPoint. If you could, so back in November, we went out and we kind of surveyed the area on a Friday and Saturday, looked at how filled or not filled the parking spaces were out in the area, right? And we showed you some of that information previously, but it was really just kind of a documentation of what was there. And in our agreement and in our professional ethics, we wanted to go a little farther with it, right? We wanted to see, okay, today it looked like it's okay. What happens in the future if some of the new projects come online, if you develop some of the properties and add additional stories or intensify the use that would be permitted in the code, and what happens with that? So we took a look at that and came up with a little report that is got in your packet. I hope that my slides come up pretty soon. That they can talk you through it real quick, but essentially what we did, yes.
I didn't have those slides. Brad, did you have them?
Up in a minute.
Did you email those?
Yeah, I sent you a link.
Okay.
Aaron, they were in the SharePoint link. I just added it to the end of what we had for the architectural guidelines.
Okay.
Well, you guys have got it in your packets anyway. I'm just gonna keep talking through that, and if they get them, awesome. If they don't, right? So, we started out, we did parking calculations. We found that there's about 1,344 parking spaces out in the area, including some handicap accessible spaces. We know that what we found from our analysis when we did the utilization work is that people love to park on the street on Fifth. No surprise, right? Peak periods would be, again, probably no surprise, but lunch hour is the big push. And there are some blocks, particularly in the 100 and 200 block of Fifth, that can get pretty full or completely full at lunchtime. But most of the other times of day that we studied, there were available spots in those areas.
Mike, do you want the study or was there a PowerPoint?
There was a PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll keep looking.
Well, do you have it in your packet? You got the PowerPoint slides to go on parking? Yeah, they got it. Okay, so they got it. All right, so the other things we found, the off-street parking lots generally had available spaces in them. Pretty much at any time of the day, there was some available parking in all of the off-street parking spots, right? So that's kind of what was happening out there right now. We have private parking out there. Some of it is
well organized, paved and striped. Some of it is pretty informal, some to the level of gravel lots or no striping, which isn't as efficient as it would be if it was fully improved, but nonetheless, it does provide parking out there. So in general, what we found was that as of November 6th or 8th or whatever the dates were, we went out there in November and there were good weather days. It really was and we were out there on a Friday and Saturday and there were lots of people in the area. So I think it was a pretty typical time to do it. And so that's what we generally found. Now, we certainly have had concerns about what happens when the new projects that are in the area come online. What happens if some additional sites are redeveloped, and all valid concerns. We wanted to take a look at that. So that's what the study that you guys have got in front of you now looks at. So we looked at the project coming online at, I don't even know, they're not numbered pages, right? So.
Okay, this was.
Oh, all right. Well, let me look at the packet. Maybe I can go to the page number for you guys. Hang on one second.
So nobody gets lost.
No, understand.
I found it.
Okay.
I think we're up to page 6, Aaron.
So we found.
Debbie, could we just flip through those first slides just to make sure everybody's fully on the same quote page?
Aaron, are you on share?
Yes. Come on.
Jeffrey, you think?
Bum, bum, bum.
Have you found it?
It's coming.
Gotta have the chipmunks run a little faster, Aaron.
Right here. Right here.
All right, there we go. Right, so go ahead. Next slide. All right, so this is a map showing the parking in the area and some details. You've kind of seen that already, right? So you can go to the next one. The next slide just kind of summarizes what I just covered about there being some peak periods, particularly in the 100 block of Fifth, where there was a lot of utilization of the on-street parking. The off-street parking lots and spaces generally had availability in them pretty much any time of day. So the peak periods, right, the lunchtime period and the dinner time period, I guess, would be the big peaks in the off-street lots. But even then, there was always capacity in most of the lots in the area. The areas that had the biggest demand on the off-street lots were, again, in the 100 and 200 block, as you would expect. So those are the areas that we saw. The private parking lots, again, have a mix of characteristics. Some are paved and organized, some aren't. But they do provide parking certainly for the area. We didn't count those private parking spaces when we did our utilization study. We're really looking at the public spaces, both in the public lots and on street, but we do know that there are additional private spaces available. I've kind of summarized all this before, so just go on. And then these are the graphs that kind of show those peak periods, right? So this is kind of the noontime hour. This is kind of the evening dinner hour. You can see we didn't count it by block to make sure that there weren't certain blocks that were more heavily used than others. And clearly 100 and 200 block are the most in demand for parking blocks. And those are the ones that are higher trying to show utilization. There was only one spot along Fifth, 1 block and 1 hour did hit 100% capacity when we surveyed it. Everything else was significantly less than that. Next slide. I just skip through these charts. We've covered these before. Okay, this graphic is kind of showing the new projects that are kind of starting to come online right now, right? So we've got 304 Fifth, which is mixed use building, 315 Fifth, which is again mixed use residential above commercial. We've got an event venue at 209 Fifth that we took into consideration. And then we've got the new project happening at 111 Fifth that will be coming on in the near future. You know, there were things in place of the originally in these spaces, right? But we're adding a little bit more density or we're changing uses, right? So when you look at parking demand, things like restaurants generate a higher demand for parking than, say, a typical retail store would, right? And people, at least if it's a dinner restaurant or something, the people are going to be longer. There's less those kind of situations. So we do have to take into consideration the use when we look at parking, knowing that in a business environment like this, those tenants are going to change periodically, right? So the mix is going to change. That's why it is actually really nice to have these large parking lots that we do have available that can accommodate and provide some flexibility as time goes on. So that you've got uses that can share some of these parking spaces. So my lunchtime restaurant and my ceramic pottery place don't have the same peak hours, and so they can sometimes share parking spaces. So we looked at the demand, the additional demand created by those things. Generally, what we found was there is capacity in the area to accommodate the new developments that are coming online. Now, there's something I need to clarify with how we did the methodology, and you can read it in the report, right? But our assumption in this was that people will be willing to walk about a block from their car to the business or the restaurant or whatever they're going to. It's very typical in these kind of areas to have something like that. And quite honestly, you might just as far, probably would walk farther if you were at a mall and at least as far if you were at a Walmart. So we thought that was reasonable. But to be clear, you're not always going to be able to get a parking space at the front door. I know everybody would love to be able to do that, but that's just not reality, right? So our assumption is that we're making sure that we've got available parking within 500 feet of each business in the area. Okay, so that's an important thing to keep in the back of your mind when you're looking at this information. Obviously, the highest demand, we labeled them block 6 and block 8, but that's basically the 100 and 200 blocks of the area are the highest demand. And even with those new developments coming online, it increased from utilization in the off-street lots of like 56% to 70%. So we still have capacity even with these new projects coming online as well. We're seeing in the information. Next slide. This map, which I know is too tiny to see, hopefully you can get a bigger view of that in your map. But we actually did go in with our step we have in the district, and we looked at where you could go 2 stories, where you could go 3 stories. There really is only one spot in the area where you could potentially go 3 stories. And talking to Clyde, somebody's already got a developer proposal in to redo that building and keep it a single story. So I don't see 3-story happening.
Which place is that, by the way?
It would be on the
Quilt block.
Just north of
It's an existing 2-story building, the one across the street from St. Kilda's.
Yeah.
Right
Across the street or on the same side?
across the street.
How about the quilt block building? I heard that sold.
The max they can do is 2-story.
They're not happy about that, by the way, as I understand it, but the guidelines.
That's a big chunk of real estate.
It is.
And it's probably going to go the same way everything else has been going,
Well,
probably.
they can only do 2-story.
Only do 2.
Yeah.
And step it up.
I'm sorry, Vicki.
Can they step it up? 1.
They can only, the max they can go is 2-story. They can't do a 3-story building there.
Isn't there a 2-story building on both sides of that?
No, it's, the problem is you got a 3-story in the north, 2-story building on the south, but we also have to look across the alley, and you got a 1.5 story and a 1-story residence. So that limits it to 2 stories on that lot.
Okay.
So
carry on.
There are some spots, obviously, where we could convert some 1-story structures to 2-story structures. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But we wanted to look at kind of the maximum parking demand, if you will. So we assumed that anything that's 1-story, they could go to 2-story, went to 2-story, just for the sake of looking at parking demand capacity and what would happen in the area. And so we did that. And next slide. And obviously, I don't see that ever happening, right? I can't imagine all of them being redeveloped in the future or adding a story to them, but it could. I mean, theoretically it could, right? So we wanted to look at the worst case. When we looked at that, there still was available as parking in the off-street lots. You would probably experience close to capacity, if not capacity, on street through the even up to the 400 block, I would suspect, at peak hours. But that would only be, again, the key lunchtime hour and probably getting close to that in the evening. But generally speaking, there would always be available parking in the off-street lots with the maximum density that we would allow, given our height restrictions and criteria that we've put in the code. So we're not suggesting a need to build any new parking in the area anytime in the near future. However, we want to be, forward thinking, right? And sometimes we're wrong. So if we're wrong, we came up with a number of recommendations in the back of the document that says, okay, if there is a problem, what steps would you do to kind of address it, right? And so we came up with a sequence of things in here. Some are very simple and low cost. Some would be much more cost, right? So first simple one, go back from here. Okay. The last one. First one is really simple, right? Just make sure people understand where the parking is, which sounds simple. It's not as simple as it sounds, right? But Steve's got a map on your foundation website that shows people where parking is, right? We could do flyers, we could do social media posts. Those things aren't particularly expensive, but are ways to let people know where their available parking is and continue to promote that. You guys do a good job with that generally on the foundation site, but continue to do that is the first simple thing. We have enforced assigned hours, right? So the city has signed certain areas for 2-hour parking, 4-hour parking, et cetera, in the area, but it's not really enforced. If you got an area of the district that began to be a continual problem of parking, you could certainly begin to enforce those hours, and that would certainly be one way to help alleviate the parking issues if they became more significant in the future. Again, there's a cost involved with that because you got to hire somebody to map it and mark it and do that kind of thing. But you can also charge fines to kind of recoup some of that cost. This one we talked about earlier. One of the concerns that was brought up a lot in this conversation early on was, we're adding new residents in here. We're not requiring any parking. I get that. My suggestion was to require for new residential units to have some designated parking space. If I rented a house or an apartment or even bought a condo in this area, for example, I would want to know that I've got somewhere that when I come home at 7:30 or whatever after work, I got a place to park, right? So our suggestion is let's have them have a leased parking space somewhere within 200 or 300 feet of that unit, right? That is going to be there. That could absolutely be an existing parking lot. I'm not encouraging building more parking, but I do think that we want to make sure that those residents have somewhere that they can confidently know they've got available to park. So that was a suggestion. Next slide, please. Explore electronic signs. This is something that some communities are starting to do. Now you have to believe that people read the signs that you put out there, and they don't always do that, okay? But if they read the signs, you could have meters out there that tell you that there are 40 spaces right behind this building, an electronic sign that would tell you the availability and the count of those kind of things. It's newer technology, certainly isn't free, but would be one way to let people know maybe this lot here is full, but there's a lot over there that would have some available parking in it. So you can integrate electronic technology to help people understand better where available parking is when they don't see it right in front of the building. So that's a possibility. Kind of a fun one. And that I've seen in some places, they have pedicabs, right? Basically a bicycle with a couple of seats on the back that young folks that are energetic and more capable than me cart people around to different areas, right? It would be a great way to kind of shuttle people around the area. You certainly can do it with trolley systems and those kind of things as well to get people from one parking area to another. So those are possibilities without, again, building more parking. And so those are some suggestions. Is there another one or is that it? That's it, right? So those are some suggestions of things to pursue before you start building more parking lots. From what we're seeing and looking at these projections, we don't think there's going to be a need for building more parking space anytime soon in this area. That's just our opinion. Obviously, when you have farmers market or big event, you're going to have some parking challenges. There's no question about that. Our analysis was looking at the day-to-day operation of the area, not looking at special events. Special events, you also think about. Brad showed me a map of actually the city's gone in and looked at all the available on-street spots between
1st and 7th, I think, right? So you've got documentation of that. I think there was 232-ish on-street spots in that area. Most of that I'm not even counting in this analysis, because most of the time it doesn't need to be used except when you've got an event or something going on in the area. So anyway, that's a thought and a look at the parking in the area. Really just kind of presenting the information to you. If you got questions, be happy to answer them. It's not anything you need to vote on. We just wanted to make sure that you.
And I think one of the things that I've noticed is that particularly on street, there is more people parking on the street. And so I think there's a perception, particularly if somebody had come down here 5, 7, 8 years ago, oh, wow, there's a parking problem. But it's actually better utilization of the parking that we have there. I mean, we've got a lot of parking, and truthfully, a lot of it's kind of going begging, and it's, you know, we've kind of parked this area for the Christmas rush rather than the daily needs. So I think people think that because, wow, I go down the street, I can only see 1 or 2 spots open, that there's a parking problem. And it's not really, there really is available parking in the area. Some people may not want to walk, but it is available.
Debbie had her hand up.
Perfect. Debbie?
Yeah, thank you. Couple of clarifying questions. First, I really appreciate, Claude, that you brought up the perception of parking. There's a cliche, and that is perception is reality. So one of my questions would be, if there is not really a parking problem, why do so many people, especially customers, think that there is a parking problem? And part of my opinion has been influenced by my stepfather, who was the electrical engineering consultant for General Growth Development and Management Company, who in the early 1980s were the 7th largest but most profitable shopping center management and developing companies. And he, as a previous board president and owner of our properties, was extremely concerned about the dollar value of each parking place in any given shopping area, and what that value was, as of course, you know, he didn't just do electrical engineering, but as a shopping center, as a development came to an area, and what the needs for parking were, so that that organization or developer could make money. So in addition to those thoughts, in fact, you know, he always was very emphatic about none of our tenants need to be parking on street. They need to be using the commercial lots or the lots that we bought, which we have 3 pretty sizable ones. And I know, Mark, you and Victoria have also, you've got the history of having had lots so that you could provide those for your workers, tenants, and customers. And so that's part of the dollar value. We keep talking about dollar value for developers. We need to think about dollar value for merchants. Merchants don't get mentioned, as I said before. And I would like to know the dates of the multiple surveys that you did and the gathering points for information that you have for this interesting survey. Thanks.
November
21st.
It was like the first weekend in November.
November 21st and 22nd, I believe.
No, it was earlier than that because we were celebrating our anniversary that weekend they did it. That's always around the 7th.
That's what it's.
You mean there hasn't been another survey since that one survey?
November 5th and 6th when we did the counts.
I guess I thought they were redoing the survey.
And
So since the new buildings have started to open up, there has not been another survey done?
329 would have been open.
Mike took a look at what those buildings, once they're fully occupied, what the parking demand would be. And even looking at that, there was still more than adequate parking to accommodate those uses at full occupancy.
It is a good point, though, Debbie. I probably should have added a recommendation that you do go out and survey parking like this every, and you don't think they need to do it every year, but maybe every 5 years or something like that, just to make sure that
that's tracking the way we think it's going to track, and things do change over time, and maybe in 5 years you do need to look at something else. But I think doing a regular review of the parking probably is a good idea. So I will add that to the suggestions.
I had a quick
With all
comment.
due respect, in response to that, there has been a lot that's happened since November, and that's not exactly prime time. So certainly, I would be very interested in knowing what kind of data would be collected in terms of this research process in the later spring or summer and early fall, as opposed to getting more toward the end of November or so.
Debbie,
That's very
we
important
can't,
for us
because
to do.
Debbie, I was involved in doing the counting, and that was very equivalent to what you would see out there on the street and within the city parking lots like this week.
Actually, it was higher.
It probably was.
It was. I have to disagree with you on that, Debbie. That was primetime holiday shopping. And there was a big push for shop sooner. And so people were coming out to the district, and the district was full that day. I mean, all the businesses had a wonderful shopping day traffic wise. And I remember that weekend vividly because we had an event that weekend.
Well, I think you misunderstood my point. I wasn't saying that there wasn't any shopping or it wasn't at a time when people were shopping. I'm saying that there's been a lot of change that's taken place since that time. And there are increasing number of buildings that are open. And if we want to have valid information, just like any researchers, we would want to make sure that we cover that data collection process so that it is as valid as possible. That's what is certainly recommended in research.
Right. I understand. I thought you had said that particular weekend wasn't a good representation because of traffic. So I apologize.
I certainly did not. I certainly did not say that. So thank you for correcting that.
And Julie has her hand up.
All right, Julie, and then we'll get to, I know Mark and Steve had their hand up as well.
Yeah, I had 3 quick points. I parked, I had a meeting at the foundation 2 Fridays ago. I was at 1:00. I was working from home that day, so I was not able to just walk from the office. I drove and I parked behind the foundation office. There was plenty of parking. I talked to my mom, who brought my 95-year-old grandma down to the community center that afternoon to play bingo. And I specifically asked her, how was parking? Because my grandmother cannot go very far at all. And she said it was just fine. So I took it upon myself to reach out to ask specifically about parking. And so I asked those of you who are hearing that there is someone is not finding parking, if you could say, hey, I'm actually on a committee I'm in a position of influence regarding parking. Can you tell me where you looked up and down 5th? Did you try the public parking in the back? Because without data of hearing specific instances where we were 100% full, or hearing people say, I looked in the 4th Street public parking, I looked in the 6th Street public parking, I went up and down 5th Street 5 times. I don't know how we have any legitimate data except for someone's perception of where they would like to park as opposed to where they could park to inform this issue. And so I need more data, and I implore the people on this committee to start gathering and start asking people who are expressing this concern specifically where the concern, like where is the parking problem?
And Julie, I think that's a great idea at the city council meeting. And Mark, Victoria, you may know this because you know of the people, but the quilt block person talked, and that's documented, and I can certainly look through the minutes. But there have, even at the city council meeting, there have been specific business owners that have specifically talked about their customers, and in particular, in this case, elderly people with heavy sewing machines having to walk a long distance. And, you know, I think it's a great idea to gather all this so that we can show what is physically out there or documented out there in terms of some of these issues, and that would certainly create a better understanding. So thank you.
And then the third point is, I think a new parking study obviously should happen. I know it's going to be imperfect again because of so much construction happening. So you kind of have to weigh in. You have daytime construction workers, and depending on the phase of the project, you may have a huge plumbing crew one day with 5 trucks and extra crew members, and it's going to be imperfect in that area going forward just because of the nature of the construction happening. So just as long as we keep that in mind, that one day is not the perfect snapshot.
Yeah, and Julie, I think you bring up a good point as far as, asking customers questions, and the foundation, we're really trying to do a better job of educating people. We have signage, but sometimes people don't see signage. But, as someone who helps with clearing the streets for farmers market, we have people that are coming in or asking them to move their vehicles, and like, well, where do I go? We educate them on the public lots, and like, oh, I never knew that those were there. We had one gentleman that tried to pull in a Maple, and I said, well, you need to park in the public lots. Well, I checked the lots, they were full. And I said, well, this one fills up, sooner, but the other 3, you should be able to find spots. He's like, well, I didn't check those. And so I think it's, educating and talking to our customers too, about where you can utilize the parking, and that it is free and that you can do that. So Julie, I definitely think, asking questions and then taking the time to educate and just have those conversations with people that are coming here.
So, and not to belabor the point about the November study, but I would say there's probably more parking available now, certainly than there was then, because 315 there's 5 apartments occupied, I believe. The rest of it is not moved into. 304 is not moved into. 111, 113 is not moved into. Longest Yard is closed. First National Bank is open. So you think about all the contractors' trucks that were, especially in the 300 block, those aren't there anymore.
And part of it was fenced off in front of it.
Yeah. So I think there's probably more available on-street parking now than there was in November.
Wow.
And to the broad point, I guess kind of touched on what a few people have said. It's a battle we will never win. We will always have to remind people, park off street. There's parking available. I know of a number of businesses and business owners who every day will park in front of their business or a neighboring business rather than park in a parking lot. And I've talked to them and I've said, you're taking your customers' parking when you do that, or you're taking your neighbor's customers' parking, and it just doesn't sink in. Mm-hmm. So it's just something that we have to keep doing. I know you guys have talked about, and Debbie has mentioned too, like, you tell your employees and your tenants, you don't park on Fifth Street. You use that for customer parking. And the more we can get property owners and business owners to let, to take that to heart, the better. So it's something we're never going to win, but I think we'll always keep working on.
Okay, I think parking as far as merchants go in Valley Junction is probably one of the most important things that can be talked about. I thought we would do this at the first of it. I know I came on board because of parking, because I have tenants like Nan and other people that said, this is going to impact my business. I was here in 1970. We had no parking. The only parking was in front of the stores or directly behind the stores. I have personally been going out for the last 2.5 months. I'm out here every day. I've been doing it for 52 years. I watch the parking lots. I know when the peak hours are and everything like that. Like I'd also say, hey, where'd you park tonight? Was anybody able to park there? There was not a spot in this parking lot when I pulled in, and Longest Yard is not there anymore. So I can tell you, with your thing going across the street that needs 52 parking spots, there's going to be a major problem in this block. I can tell you that right now. And the last 4 days, even in the hottest of the heat at noon on 5th Street, there's barely a parking spot unless somebody pulls out.
On the street.
On the street. Right. And every spot behind these buildings where I'm assuming the store owners probably park, it's all full. Granted, behind the 200 block, there's some space. We do have to take into consideration the construction and everything, but I don't think we need a mathematician to figure out. You figured out we needed 100 and some additional spaces right now. These new buildings could really impact all our parking lots. Like just one of them could take out the whole parking lot, down behind Nance. And I'm not saying that's horrible. It's a good problem to have that we need parking, but I'm just saying we better do something before we get a lot more development, because I can tell you it's going to impact the people of the neighborhood because people are going to be parking there. And when these restaurants open and the bar and 315, you have 15 or 20 apartments up there, it's definitely going to affect things because the pattern is going to change.
Sure.
There's going to be 24-hour-a-day parkers. There's going to be some relief when people go home from work. I know in the one building, there's 21 employees at least upstairs, and they're going to be there all day. So obviously, where are they going to park? Are they going to be good and go to the parking lots, or are they going to be on Main Street in front of stores? I don't know. That's an unknown, but it's going to be a problem. And people, the greatest thing about Valley Junction in the past is we haven't been like downtown Des Moines where you have to walk 3 blocks from the parking garage, or now need a meter. You have to go get your license plate number, walk 2 blocks to the meter, put it in, and do all that. People want to not be hassled for parking. That's the one thing that goes back to, Jack Swanders and everything else. That's one reason people come down here. They don't want to go through that aggravation. And when you see what's happened downtown or in the East Village, I don't go there anymore because it is a hassle to park. I'll drive around the block 3 times. If I can't find any place that's convenient, I'm out of there. And it'll be the same thing here. And that's the only thing we can sell, I think, to keep this town. And that's what made it. It was comfortable for people to come here and visit funky little small businesses. And it took a long time and a lot of money to get the parking lots we have. And I just don't want to overdevelop things to where we blow it,
And I think you made some good points as far as like.
It's been a long run and we've been doing great.
I think we all agree that we don't want to install like a paid parking system down here. I think that really makes us competitive to other areas down here. But also too, if we get to the point where, we are going to have more employees in the area and more people living here in apartments, then I think that's when we go for enforcing the 4 hours.
The figures here, I've had, I think, 11 tenants, restaurants. So I can speak that I know a little bit about restaurants out here. And when you get a restaurant that's really going, it'll take, Cooper's is an example. The Tavern is an example. G. Miggs is an example. If you ride down the street during the hours, you can just tell that whole half a street on the street is in Cooper's or Winchester's or
I think
we're just coming into bigger stuff than that. Finally, we've got some restaurants. I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
But you have employees, then you have to figure out, do people come as a couple or a 4-top? I've been researching this because, that means 1 car or 2 cars or, they don't take mass transit. I can tell you that.
And I think it depends too. I think a lot of people are visiting the restaurants during the day. You get some people that specifically come to the restaurants for lunch. A lot of it is, hey, I'm down here. What's there to eat? And so they're already parking somewhere. So they are utilizing whatever parking spot they came to for whatever reason to maybe go to the restaurant. But again, that shared parking. So during the day, when most of the shops have most of their traffic, when they close at 5:30 or 6, then it kind of shifts over to that restaurant crowd. Because like even on like Monday nights or when a lot of the restaurants are closed, like Monday nights down here, like it is the parking lot or the entire Fifth Street is almost empty.
Yeah.
And even Tuesday nights a little bit slower. And so I think by using that shared, where it's kind of like obviously the businesses like Red Dot or anything where their employees are here during the day, they're utilizing a lot of the spaces too, but more of the evening traffic will be for those restaurants.
Everything be changing. It's just like behind City Hall, all that parking I've noticed is the EMS department.
Yep.
You know, all day long now. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of dynamics in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And
And the fact
makes
that,
sense.
you know, there's more people coming down here too. So I think people who have been shopping and visiting Valley Junction for a long time were able to pull up right in front. And so now that more people are coming down here and we don't have as many vacancies and more businesses are down here, they're not used to not being able to park in that, you know, right where they need it.
We build, the more we'll need.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going on record for that.
It's going to be caused, our parking problem's not going to be caused by the apartments. Parking problem will be caused by restaurants and bars.
The base of the apartments is, you can't not count that out. They may be,
Typically,
apartment has,
but the apartment people leave in the morning and they come back usually after 5.
At dinner time.
okay, they'll be taking,
A lot of
a lot of them will be 2 family incomes, which usually means 2 cars.
Most of our
So they'll be coming in at the restaurant hour.
Most of our apartments are efficiency apartments. So I think, because the one project that we have going right now that's fully open and occupied at 329, those are all single individuals. Now, it's not to say that there won't be a unit that has 2 individuals or whatever,
Not most of them.
but the apartments aren't going to cause a parking problem for us in the future. It's going to be.
Where do they go on Saturday?
I'm sorry?
Where do they go on Saturday and Sunday, which are traditionally pretty busy days down here?
Saturday and Sunday, all the offices are closed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, you get, it all kind of shares each other.
They say if you add all the folks up, you're going to need more parking. I'm telling you, you will.
Oh, we know that they're.
So
I wasn't saying that it wasn't going to be.
buildings you put up, the more parking you're going to need. It doesn't take a brain trust. So.
I guess
But I think Mike has a good idea, and as he stated, maybe it needs to be revisited more often
Years go out.
Yep.
to, you know, just gauge.
Well, yeah, but what's our
The
game
need.
plan if we keep
That's what I'm curious.
building buildings and not doing anything? No restrictions or anything.
Couple things to that. One, we've really, with our stepping criteria, limit the amount of new development that's going to happen, right? Because in most cases, at most, you could add 1 more story, and the economics of tearing down the building to add 1 more story probably don't make sense. Most of those buildings probably are not designed to accommodate an additional story on the existing structure, so you'd have to demolish it to make it work. So I don't think you're going to get a lot of new redevelopment on Fifth the way we've developed these standards. You'll certainly get different tenants in there, right? And like we talked about, if we add more restaurants, that may change the mix. That may we have to do and take a look at, which is why I think, doing a periodic count every 2 or 3 years probably is a really good idea, because then you can keep track of it. And then you can explore, if we have a problem, that list of 5 or 6 things I've suggested at the end of the document that you could address before you start building and spending a lot more money on parking. One other thing real quick while I got the floor. Steve asked me an interesting question about land utilization in this area, and that's why I was curious. So we took a look at it, right? In your historic Valley Junction Business District, south of Locust, I'm not talking about the area we're talking about to the north and transition later on, but south of Locust, that area, 37% of the area is in public right-of-way, streets or alleys, okay? Another 27% is in parking, and only 8% is in, or 28% is in buildings, and about 8% is in open space. So the things that actually attract you to the area, I will count buildings and open space, that's 36% of the area, roughly slightly more than a third, right? So we're already dedicating a huge chunk of land to transportation and to parking. From my perspective, those aren't the elements that draw you to the area. What draws you to the area is the buildings and the character and whatever. So again, that emphasizes the point of be real careful before we start adding a lot more parking spaces. I want to make sure we're utilizing what we've got and utilizing it as efficiently as possible. That's why we've got suggestions in there about maps and electronic systems and all those kind of things to make sure that people can utilize what's there and know what's there. I think, Meredith, your point was absolutely right. People just don't know that some of that stuff is there, and they just see the stuff on street and they see it full. They think you got a parking problem. But our numbers don't suggest that you have a parking problem today. Sorry.
Any other committee discussion before we open up to public comment?
I was just going to state like an opinion for my, like being a resident. it's a combination of things, but I noticed a lot more for events, which wasn't part of this. But I noticed there's a lot more cars on my street than ever before. Combination, I think 8th Street being closed, a little bit of construction on 5th Street, but yeah, it's probably the busiest I've ever seen it this year. There's been a couple big events that it's just been slammed.
I can see that.
Crazy.
And I think, you know, and I don't know about your neighborhood specifically, but I know like in my neighborhood, now all these young kids are all now drivers and they all have cars. And like I said, I don't know what your neighborhood is.
No.
Your kids are driving.
Neighborhood, all of a sudden, there's a whole lot of more cars parking on the street that never used to park there.
And that's why I just stated it how I did, because it wasn't a debate, because there's a lot of contributing factors to it. So just an observation.
That's also, I think, a kudos to Steve and his crew for throwing great free events every Thursday and a couple of other times throughout the year that bring a lot of people down here.
Yeah.
Even though I know, I mean, the parking near your house is inconvenient, but
In the trash.
it's great to have those great events.
That's the one downside to the street parking.
I
Provide a great volunteer opportunity.
for that. I really feel that the parking issue will continuously be addressed. I don't think this is the last we're going to have of it. I said, parking will continuously be addressed. This isn't the last we're going to talk about parking. I think every year and a half or two, we should revisit it. Dynamics do change, development then changes, but you're making a recommendation based on your study, what that is. Got to be based on something. This is what you're in the business of doing. So I feel the city will be committed to making sure that we address parking, you know, on a fairly regular basis as situation changes.
At this point, open up for public comment.
Oh, my other half.
Mark, is that your wife?
Maria Vayak, 801 37th Street, and I have a business down here and own several buildings. And I thought when we started this whole thing, Mike, that you told us we needed 116 new parking spaces. Just with the buildings that were being proposed at that time.
Yeah, what we looked at was the additional demand for parking of different uses, and that's built into this analysis that we've looked at now. So there is capacity in your existing lots to accommodate those additional parking demands.
I mean, I think it's really hard to know until things do get occupied, how many cars you're going to need. Like, for instance, I had Wicker Works for 40 years and I was a full-time employee, and then I had like 3 other people. So we took up 4 parking spots. And since then, we had sold the building, it went to KCL, and Julie could tell me how many employees they have, but I think they have 25 or 30. So that same spot, even though at one time it had 5 cars, now has 25 cars. So I think it's really hard for you to know who's going to move into a building when it hasn't been rented yet.
Right.
And saying it's fully occupied, you're not going to need that parking. I mean, I just think that's really, it's optimistic on your part. And I think it's great if people leave and then other people come and stuff like that. But I just don't think that's going to happen. And the other thing, when you did your survey, Heavenly wasn't open because of COVID. There's a lot of people who maybe weren't open as much because of COVID and all that kind of stuff. When you did your study, and as a restaurant, I know pretty easily at one time when there was a different Chinese restaurant in there, they could easily add 50 or 60 cars to the whole scenario. So I think that a lot of people work at home nowadays too, since COVID. And so saying that everyone in the apartments is going to leave during the day is not always going to be true. And I am really concerned about parking in Valley Junction and all of the new construction. And I think you can say that it's going to be okay and we have enough parking, but I just want to go on record as saying I don't think that's true. And I think we're going to need more parking immediately, as soon as, because we don't even know, because those places they haven't even been rented yet. So it's really hard to know.
So then what do we tear down?
Well, I think the city should have thought about that before they allowed 3-story buildings.
But if you're saying
Or
they didn't, so
demolition.
what do we tear down? Because I've had business owners ask me, when is the city going to start buying houses to tear down for parking?
Like the businesses that are going up.
Yeah, no, this is existing businesses. Long
Saying
time
new
business.
construction, we should have added in.
Should have had it on
But I'm,
construction.
that's
like the
I'm saying, no,
now.
we can't undo the past, but if you're saying we need to address parking now, where do we add it? What do we tear down?
Because in the 300 block right now, we have 3-story buildings that were never there before.
So what?
That's like adding 6 buildings.
Went up to the 3rd block.
You know, I think that's up to the city.
That's what the residents.
The city's the one who allowed them to do that. The city is the one who gave them permission to build those buildings and.
We rely on recommendations of folks.
So
in the
just
study.
asking-
Yeah, well, that's what they did
Yeah.
before is.
Where are we?
The parking lots we have now behind the buildings. The city bought houses, tore them down, and then assessed us.
Right.
So now you're saying all the new development people, they should be able to use those parking lots that we paid for the stores that were already there.
All I'm asking is, we know we're looking at a limited, specific geographic area. We can't grow Valley Junction sideways or north or south.
We are right now.
Parking, I think, is going to impact the neighborhood.
But where do
Because if they can't park in parking lots, they're going to park in front of the neighbors' houses.
But they can't park on 4th Street. So where, like I said, if you get to the point where people are unwilling to walk 2 blocks
Yeah.
to Bing's, then what do we tear down so people can park closer? Do we tear down houses? Do we start tearing down commercial buildings? That's that balancing act. You know, to some extent, this is a self-governing issue. When it gets too busy,
Build
the
a parking
people
lot,
who
2 or 3 levels.
who don't want to have to deal with parking are going to stay away. It's like Mark with the East Village. I don't want to deal with parking, so I'm not going to go. And that's fine. There's a set of people that will do that. And there's a set of people who will say, it looks like a busy place. I'm willing to walk an extra block. So it kind of levels out itself. But my concern is whatever happened in the past, none of us can undo. But going forward, if the demand is we need more parking right now, how do we do that? I think Mike's and Teska's recommendations are great. We need to let people know where the parking is. I think personally, the city should be enforcing parking. I think they should allow overnight parking. Nobody can convince me any reason why there's no overnight parking.
I'm with you.
I thought there were 360 overnight parking spaces.
There's no overnight on-street parking.
On
Snowplows.
They're there, but you can't.
Steve, you got to plow snow.
On street.
Steve, you have to plow the snow in Valley Junction.
They've noticed.
And when you
do that when cars are.
somebody has to be out the street.
We're at home, our neighborhoods, we have to move our cars, so.
I guess the other part of this is, I mean, that's flawed logic, straight up, because they need business, they need to make money. So that idea that, hey, it's busy and somebody leaves, no big deal, tell that to a merchant.
Yeah.
No, but how are sales? Are they suffering because of lack of parking?
Well, the people haven't moved into the new spots yet.
Well, and
Buildings are still being built and the tenants aren't even in them yet.
And this is why I think Mike and Renee has said this too, you know, the city will look at doing this
in the back
on a regular basis. It's something we all want to know.
I mean,
How, you know,
we projected the demand for the uses and we feel there's capacity in existing lots. But if we're wrong, that's why you go back and you do a count another year and see what the facts are. So I agree.
Well, I heard, you know, like in 5 years, do another study or something. I think there should be some kind of a task force that really keeps track of the parking down here because of all the new construction and all the new businesses and all the new restaurants that are coming to town, which is great for all of us. But maybe have something or another committee or something to watch it. I don't know what to do about it. I just know it's going to happen. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying Mike told us 116 spots, and I thought that was really probably not going to be enough.
Okay.
So I think there could be a need for another 200 spots.
Well,
how do we?
Where do they go?
I don't know.
Like,
which is why I want to study it.
out of curiosity, why didn't we require some parking behind these new buildings when we done these draft guidelines? We got 6 spots. If that's 8 spots, that could be employed.
Because there's enough space in those existing lots to accommodate the additional demand.
Okay, so when we get to the point we don't have it, and we go through A, B, C, and D, and we put in these meters and all that, is there going to be future talk of tearing down houses to put in more parking lots? What is that? That's what we want to know as residents.
That's what we're seeing is the guidelines that we created and the height limitations that we got, the amount of additional development that could happen should not generate a need for building additional parking lots in our professional.
I just wanted that on record, so.
I hope you're right.
I noticed that the parking right there on 6th Street, from like Maple down, that parking lot it doesn't stay full. Then when you get across, it's at Elm, there's more parking where the church is and EMS is. That doesn't stay full.
For now.
And I know, but I think it will. I know what you're saying because I brought it up at the last meeting, the parking issue. And so I've really been kind of watching it and studying it myself. And I'm not seeing a lot of use. And then I say, okay, more people are going to come in. But still, I think those parking spaces where the church is, the EMS, and especially on 6th Street between Maple, I think that accommodate residents. I think, we'll see.
Talking about the church behind the old city hall.
Yes.
There is a group of,
My daughter lives up there.
on my walk, 3 blocks.
I seen you driving through one.
Does everybody want
Go
to?
down the
on
alley
his
every
job.
day, man.
We got some cross conversation happening now.
Do they have signs up there? It's just.
Can we have one conversation? Okay.
Church has some lots,
Okay.
some spots.
Let's have Helen make her comment.
Oh, we're running late.
Really?
Helen Rodish, 913. Well, I've been talking about problems with parking all along, and I just got this pamphlet tonight, so I haven't read it all. And I did listen to his conversation a little bit, and this is one of the things that bothers me. It says on page 2, July 15, 2020, page 2, if you can look it up there, the bottom line says the city allows up to 24 hours of parking in the public parking lots. And, you know, I hate to tell you this, I think you need to bid a parking lot for me and my parking, because I have parking problems where I'm at. Why can't the city put parking in for me as a resident? Because they're letting the businesses go from 6 a.m. in the morning till 6 a.m. in the morning till 2 a.m. at night when the bars close. And then you're going to say, okay, we're going to give these residents free parking when, you know, this is going for the business community, and the residents are going to be able to park there overnight. And the people that are building those buildings aren't responsible for putting parking in for their building. Now, the other people have to put parking in for their businesses. You know, just like where I'm at now, they have to put parking in when they put an M1. They got to put parking out in front. What happened to these 3 buildings that are putting apartment complexes in there, single or whatever you want to call them? These people are going to have cars. And so the city is going to furnish the parking for those parking from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. the morning, when the parking lots, well, the street itself was from 2 to 6 a.m. in the morning. They came in and cleaned the streets at night, and they came in and plowed the streets at night, and they cleared off the sidewalks so you could get your customers into your building.
Doesn't clear off the sidewalk.
Well, they did, they used to, but I mean, they used to come in and do it. It just depends. But they did plow it, and they did come in at times and did remove some of it. I remember, but it's been, I don't know what they do now because I haven't been down there. But why is it the city is going on and saying right here, the city allows up to 24 hours. There's not a cop out there that's marking tires. And
We can't anymore. There was a court case on it and we're prohibited from doing it.
oh, well, okay. But what happens when the person's parking between 2 and 6 in the morning? You can't do anything about them either? That's different.
No, I'm saying.
No.
the-
They can't mark tires anymore.
That's the code that the city established for where and how long people can park in certain areas.
Okay, but why is it that, you know, the businesses are struggling to keep their businesses going and having parking, and then you put in apartment?
What businesses are struggling to have their businesses going?
What?
Some of these businesses have had the best years of their lives. what businesses, because of parking, is suffering? Which ones are they? Do you have them?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the city has provided parking for the businesses. The businesses are open from 6 in the morning till 2 a.m. in the morning. They close. And then we're having apartments in there with businesses, people that are living in those apartments that are having
Apartments are for.
24-hour parking, and the city's supposed to take care of it.
Those parking lots existed before public parking. Anybody could park there. I understand what you're saying, but there may be people in the neighborhood who even use the space or their guests come. I've known that to be, but I understand what you're saying. And I've noticed that the business, I think it's 315, has made way in the alley for parking behind the building that would accommodate at least the apartment residents.
There is,
2 houses.
before any of the new buildings were built, there were apartments and still are apartments upstairs. And those people are parking in city parking lots most likely.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, it just doesn't seem right that, we're paying for their parking and I brought up about the fact of that they were gonna, what are they gonna do about parking? And I talk about taking other houses on 4th Street. And so, and that's gonna happen. Just from what you're saying, needing more parking, they're gonna be closer over on 4th Street, the 100 or 200 block, they're gonna start buying houses there and taking them out for parking lots.
Yeah.
Just mark my word.
Okay.
But no, like I said, that parking from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. was for the street cleaners and the removal of snow. That's where it's at. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Thank
But
you.
we, because I live here, we got plowed twice, 2 nights last year, as I recall, or over the last winter. And, this is kind of my beef with the no on-street parking thing too. This is public infrastructure that you taxpayers pay for. So why would you want a public street or a public parking lot to, hey, here's a chunk of infrastructure you pay for it, but nobody can use it for a third of the day. And people say, well, I can't have people park on 5th Street overnight. Why not?
Yeah. For it.
Yeah.
You can't take them away to the business at 3 a.m. There's nobody open,
There's people, games and games.
I think, again, I really do think if this is a problem, then the city should start enforcing it. We have signs on every block and every block.
Ooh, the fly on the wall.
I've said that at city council before. 'Cause I've been down there at 4 a.m. on a jog and counting cars multiple times.
Yeah.
Done it.
Debbie also.
I'm gonna.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, could I just ask Clyde to clarify something that he just said? Clyde, on the two houses that were bought behind, I believe, the Union Building, one of them was owned by Morrissey's. How many apartments did you say were upstairs in those houses?
I didn't say.
You said apartments upstairs in the lots.
I'm saying, no, what I said earlier to address Helen's comment was that there are existing apartments that were there long before any of those new buildings were built in the 300 block. And the residents on those, I would imagine, if there was not parking behind the building, which there isn't in quite a few of those, they were probably parking in city parking lots.
In which buildings?
I don't know where all the apartments are, but I'm saying I know there are apartments in the 1 and 200 block. And those people are across somewhere.
The corner.
Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, Tina.
It shines up the 107 10th Street.
Have everyone
On Thursday, it's
attention on.
not uncommon for cars to be on my street, and I'm on 10th Street. So that happens a couple times during the
Is that farmer's market night?
farmer's market night.
Read in the public.
Also on Sundays, there's a lot of ball games that are played, and it's not uncommon to have cars on my street. So I would like to challenge your numbers. I'd like to see Thursday and Sunday included in those numbers that you averaged in.
Yeah. Okay.
Beyond 5th Street, are you talking about, Miss Tina?
What's that?
Are you saying beyond 5th Street? Because I heard you say in our neighborhood, so beyond 5th Street?
Well, yeah, but I'm sure that.
Holiday Park is a story of its own. Okay.
Any comments on parking?
We could all night.
Okay, so I think the consensus is that we'll revisit this on a more regular basis. And then based off the recommendations, start with those. And then if we can get those, then we'll reevaluate and reassess.
Talk more about it.
Yes, I would say, yeah, if it gets to be an issue, then talk about, enforcement. I think, yeah, by enforcing the 4-hour parking on Fifth Street, you're gonna eliminate, people living in apartments parking on there. You're gonna eliminate people that work in the district parking on there. So that'll really open up parking for
You
customers.
have people parking commercial vehicles in city parking lots with trailers and stuff, and they're not supposed to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
Code enforcement.
From a merchant standpoint, customers too much and give them tickets. I know we've been down that alley before decades ago and it's ugly. Enforcing parking is ugly and it costs a lot.
Were you going to do that?
Can I just bring up,
Just a bundle of joy.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, and that can be part of the education process too. It's like, if you're gonna be down here longer than 4 hours, then utilize our parking lots. But if you're just coming in to pick up cookies from Nan's or drop off a sewing machine or something like that, then utilize the Fifth Street parking where you're not gonna be here for 4 hours.
We'd like to thank you for whatever's in this bag. I don't know.
Probably a.
Hey, no, mine.
Hey, Mark.
That is the perfect segue. You have the bags here. This is, the last section of our study area we discussed tonight. And with that, we wanted to give everybody a token of our appreciation and thanks. So you have gift bags there for all.
last meeting?
Yeah.
This is close
This is,
compensating you for all the time and effort, the hours.
Yeah, I'm gonna take this home to my daughter, see what she thinks.
How much side work I can go do now?
We really appreciate everybody's time and effort in sticking with us through really, really long discussions, but I think they were all good discussions to have.
Right.
Ralph said, is it a property tax rebate?
I think what's
Right off.
What's important is to try to give you guys an idea of what's happening next, and then basically what this group is about and future of it, that sort of thing. So the future of this group, basically at this point in time, we're done with this particular piece of work, but that does not mean that your work and involvement in this process is over. Towards the beginning, when we first started off, we talked about how we wanted to have you guys work as ambassadors for this plan and to get people involved. A lot of you guys have done a really good job of getting more community people involved. That a lot of really great discussions that we've had, and so I thank you for that. But let's continue to have those conversations, continue to have people involved with that, and advocate for our baby. And I use the analogy of a baby because when a baby's learning to walk, there's a lot of bumps and bruises, and it's ugly, but that baby is learning. And I personally have learned a lot from you guys, from hearing things. I feel that you guys have learned a lot from us based on how highly elevated the conversations have become as we started this process. So I think that there's been a good give and take with all of that. So next steps, we will be working on finalizing the design guidelines. It's our plan now to have those design guidelines to Planning Commission and Council kind of in late September, early October-ish is kind of what we're looking to do. We will be contacting everybody through our normal channels via email and then also through our websites to let everyone know that these things will be moving forward to the Planning Commission and Council. So keep your eyes peeled open for that. The next thing is that we have the general overall master plan. So there's going to be, the 3 documents or 3 deliverables that's going to happen. So I already talked about the design guidelines that are in October. By the end of the year, we'll have 2 more documents that are going to come into play. That's going to be the full master plan, which is going to be very similar to that older document that you remember that was floating around with the Phoenix study and all of that. We're going to have a document, similar document that compiles all this information there. There's also going to be a PUD, which is going to take the zoning, take the ideas that we've talked about and actually codify them into an actual zoning code. And it's going to be a specific zoning code for this area. Those two things will be coming, like as I said, towards the end of this year.
We hope.
Well, we hope, we plan on it, and we're
Driving for it.
if you hear our gears grinding, that's because we're jumping a few gear shifts as we're trying to get this wrapped up for you guys. So that in general is what we're looking at. Again, as Clyde said, the gifts that we have inside of there is not enough. All of you have done. The only thing I can say is that on behalf of myself, and I'm sure Clyde and everybody else, you have been heard. Everybody doesn't necessarily agree, but that's okay. That's part of our process. But I do believe that we're going to have a really good master plan at the end of this. So I'm very inspired by that. And so I would like to personally thank all of you guys. It's been an honor.
And the Tesca people.
Yes, I like to thank,
Couple of comments as well.
okay, go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank Tesca and his group. I mean,
Absolutely.
through it all, I think we have had the best consultant. We may not have agreed with everything that Tesca has said, but they have done their job of guiding this process. So I want to say on behalf of the city, personally, Mike and Aaron and all of you, I want to thank you. You are so good at what you do because this was a very convoluted process. I want to thank the city staff too for all that it takes to put all of this together, in addition to what you're already doing. And I want to thank this committee as well. And believe it or not, everybody did not get what they wanted in this process. There were lots of ups and downs, lots of conversations, and I'm sure there's still more conversations to be had because everybody can come to city council in open forum and share their thoughts and their feelings. But believe it or not, there has been progress. There has been progress. When you talk about design standards and you talk about what Brad is saying that's to come, all of that came from when we started. How many months has it been? It might feel like 5 years, but what was it? Okay.
September. Pushing a year.
Okay. Yeah. And so I thank everyone as well. You know, we have not all agreed, but we can certainly say that there has been some progress made along the way, and that this was a process where people had an opportunity to voice their feelings and thoughts and concerns. And life is not about getting everything you want. It's about trying to make progress for the good of the order. And sometimes progress is incremental. It's not all one felt swoop. So that's what I want to say. I want to thank you, and I want to thank the staff as well, because they put in hours and hours on this. And Tesca, your organization, I'm eternally grateful.
If I may, I just want to follow up. I don't want to repeat everything that's been said, but I want to extend my thank you to Mike, Aaron, and Tesca, city council persons, and city staff for all that you have done to bring it together. I'm also thankful to residents who went forth to have their voice heard so that we could be at this table. You know, that's what we're talking about, advocating. So I want to thank everybody. I'm glad to be sitting here with you. I've learned a lot, and I've developed new friendships that I'm sure that will continue and develop even more. But I've been here, and I can say forever how long I've been here, but I see the city making huge progress in this year than what we have in the past 10, 15 years. And the part about residents being heard, we may not get what we want, and there's frustration. I get it. But this, I thought, was the best process that the city has put together to listen. And I could tell that you listened to the citizens. I remember when we talked about the transitional district, and Mike, you came back where you made modifications. You listened and you took that time to do that. So I watched you along the way adjust to. And then the city and the community development department, Brad and Clyde and Christine's not here. Thank you all, and especially our city council person, Renee at large, for the representation, the continuous and consistent fight for housing. Our voice has been heard. So I thank the Community Development Department for coming out with those 3 programs. And a lot of residents are excited about it. And that hasn't happened since probably 1990, of my opinion. So, I'm just glad that we have come this far. I thank everybody. And Scott,
And I,
remember you from long ago. My mother and father always would say as you were on zoning, but you're listening and you have a key role.
I'm here.
Sitting on that zoning. So we're glad to have you at the table too.
Another thing, in terms of thanks, we've had chairs here at this committee, Meredith and Nate. And I know it's been tough trying to herd cattle around and whatever. It's been really tough, but to chair something like this, you guys, is huge.
Yes.
You own your own business, you're working, you have your family. And to take time to come to these meetings when you could be with your family, you could be still doing business work. It takes a lot to have chaired this and to say, I'm going to raise my hand and I'm going to try to do what I can. And it has been hard. And so it does take leaders. It takes leaders to step up to the plate and to say, I'm going to be in the fight to make sure that we kind of orchestrate a process. So my hat's off to you, Meredith and Nate, for agreeing to decide that you're going to lead these meetings through the thick and the thin of it all.
Yeah.
And not that you all both agreed at every step of the way, but that's the way life is. So thank you for serving as chair of what I think has been a huge and an opportunity for growth. And you serve the city. Both of you are serving the city in this capacity as chairing.
Well, thank you. And I think, I don't want to speak for Nate, but yeah, thank you for being a great vice chair. And I think when something is so important as Valley Junction, everyone in this room and people who couldn't be here tonight are so passionate about this area. And it is such an iconic area, not only to our city, but to the state and the region and even the country, for heck's sake, making the All-American Main Street, Great American Main Street Award too. So people know Valley Junction and they love Valley Junction. And so again, progress is being made. Thank you to all that participated for the sharing ideas and different perspectives on everything. Thank you again, City. I know everyone's been thanking City and Tesca, all your time and effort, and all your guys' time and effort too. The only thing that I ask is going forward, let's remember this feeling right now. Let's remember this cooperativeness. And as this goes to planning and zoning and further in City Council, let's try and have respect for each other. Again, we're not going to always see eye to eye, but we are a community. And I think that is what's another thing that's really special about us is we're residents, we're business owners, we're property owners. We collectively make Valley Junction. And so let's all share that moment as this goes forward and be respectful and have just respect and good feelings toward another.
Civility, right?
Yes, civility. Thank you.
Kudos.
Yes, and Debbie, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I personally extremely appreciate the opportunity to be part of a group that has come together to carefully reflect and share and think about what I consider a golden prize. And it's something, we don't exist. We aren't here except for the railroad and the people that came and the merchants. That is why we are in this room. Brad, I appreciate our conversations. Kay-Shun, I mean, so many people, hundreds, thousands of people had a chance in thousands of moments to input in this. And I think we've come a long way since our very first meetings, like Brad said. I think we have gotten to a point where we can honestly share our perspective. And it's only when people can come together and honestly talk with each other and listen to other people's point of view that we can understand our past, celebrate our present, and plan and hope for our future. And I hope that the ramifications of this process continue and usher us into wonderful new things. And I thank every single one of you that's come to a meeting, that has talked at a meeting, and it means so much to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. All right, on that note.
Can I say?
Yes.
As if I don't have enough to say. I just want to say to each of us as we go along the way, I've been hearing about, I think it's the West Des Moines Historical Society, looking at the land right behind the Jordan House, or interested in the city possibly purchasing the land in which the Jordan House sits on.
Is that the?
For the Nazarene
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Church.
Land surrounding.
Surrounding it, yes.
The old Nazarene church campus.
Exactly. So it's in historic Valley Junction, I would say. Plan didn't go that far, but I would just encourage each of you to find out more about what's going on with that project and to support them in any way that you choose. I think there's some good plans coming forth for that land if the city so choose to get involved and to look at it. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you for that. On that note, I think we adjourn, but I think we should all give Aaron and Mike a huge round of applause for all of their work. All right, thank you all so much, and we'll.
And thank you enough, Mike.